the secret files of Teletraan 2.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to this month's delayed, due to real life, File the Teletraan 2. And welcome to the new format for the rest of the year. So, as everyone knows, we usually do reviews until I went insane and couldn't do reviews anymore. And we basically started just talking about any comic under the sun. But a pretty significant thing is happening in Transformers comics this year, and it is unfortunately the moving on from IDW. The rumor is it'll be picked up by Skybound Comics, who usually publish through Image, which, considering a comment made from the head of Image a few years back, I find hilarious. But that means we are in the last legs of the current IDW run, the IDW 2019 continuity, or IDW 2. So, the format going forward is every episode I'm going to have someone different on, and we're going to have a discussion. It could be about IDW 2, IDW 1, Phase 2, Phase 1. The topic will kind of be depending on the person who comes on. It can be targeted on something, it can be generalized, I don't care. I want to get... This has been, in my opinion, the most significant ownership of the brand. Going on for 18 years. So I think it's important to market. So we totally didn't have another episode recorded that crashed, which is why you went a month without a show. That didn't happen at all, Craig. Craig knows who he is. But today... I thought I want to open this up by talking about IDW 2, because it has certainly been one with both a lot of conversation and not much. So, today I thought it would be good to get a couple of people on. Unfortunately, one of them couldn't make it on this time, but in his stead, I have Canada.
Hello.
Literally Canada.
The IDW 2 Defender has logged in.
I was going to be 2-on-1, actually. You were the middle ground defender.
Oh, dang! I don't want to say it, but was I going to have a teammate?
You were. I think you were going to be the mitigator. You were going to be the like. I think you've got some points, but I think they
someone
have some
likes
points
it
too.
more than me. I'm so excited. Oh, that's so nice to hear. I mean, it's not like I face people who hate it all the time. It's just like you said, it unfortunately has fallen into a sort of state of ambivalence as far as like people talking about it, which I think is a shame. Because it is critiquable, but IDW2 is a very exciting piece of fiction that thankfully is having, it seems, a structured ending and not just getting cut off. Because that would be the worst way for it to end. Because I still think it sucks, because I think it has so much potential for many years. But yeah,
I really hope, because we've got 3 issues in the main continuity now, and then Last Bot Standing after that, but which has Autobot and Megatron on one of the covers, and now I'm very confused.
Well, what I can say is, because I was following a little conversation with Nick Roche on Twitter. Last Bot Standing is sort of not attached to any continuity, and also attached to all continuities. It's apparently it's meant to be an ending more to IDW than to either of their main continuities.
Just a general goodbye.
Yeah. Also, because I chimed in to yell at Nick, which is to say I typed his name out with spaces in between and an emoji, because someone said, when he mentioned that, Nick was like, yeah, and then, also, the ending, yeah, it's gonna be, that last page is gonna be an ending, and I was like, Nick! And then he was like, don't worry, you'll have a great time if you just, read the first 20-some pages and just skip the last few pages. Then you won't cry. And I'm like, because Nick knows how to do emotions, and Nick basically, he didn't let on, but he implied that he's going 100% Nick for the end of IDW, like its final pages, and I'm like, don't do this to me! So be prepared, everyone.
Yay! So look forward to emotional trauma. But I'm really hoping IDW2, like, those 3 issues are structured, because I'm kind of having flashbacks to Lost Light, where there was a 4-year plan that got cut down into a 2-year plan about halfway through season 2, and it really, really showed with the amount of stuff that was kind of rammed into those last 6 issues.
Yeah. I think
some of which I think could have just been quietly forgotten about, you know.
I think that we are definitely in the as far as a multi-year plan being crushed down to a 1-year plan. I think that absolutely is the case, but I think we've already had the crush point. I should say, number 1, hi, my name's Chris. Number 2, I as much as I love IDW2, I am now a few months behind in keeping up with it. However, that's not IDW2's fault. That is Comixology's fault for switching to an Amazon storefront that didn't keep any of my subscriptions, and I just didn't notice until months passed, and I was like, wait, where's Comixology? Why is this Amazon the Kindle store? And I hate the Kindle store, so I haven't entirely because I don't like Amazon's Kindle interaction. I haven't kept up. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna bite my lip and just deal with it, but I am behind on a lot of IDW2 for the last few months, basically starting whenever Comixology did the handoff to Amazon, and that is not the book's fault. That is Amazon's fault, and, thus actually my fault. But there...
I will say you can still use the Comixology app. It's just not as good as it was.
I gotta check it out, because I did all my Comixology reading in browser on my big monitor, because I like doing it that way.
You will struggle.
I know. And also, I'm no longer getting my backup copies, which is killing me, because I have 3 issues of Grimlock I haven't read yet that are backup, and that means that when I get the 4th issue...
Oh my god, read it! Read it.
I'm
gonna. It's such a good book. I love it.
I'm gonna read it, but...
I did an interview with the writer, and he's... Oh my god. There was going to be a sequel book, Grimlock in Hell.
What's killing me, though, is when I get issue 4 I will not have a hard copy backup of because it's post-swap. It's post-Amazon. And that's like, I don't know why that's bothering me so much, but it is bothering me so much.
I have to pick up the trade for that because it's hardcover.
Oh, if it's getting a hardcover, I might do that, because I'm not holding out hope for a collection style for IDW2. I think that we just got to get what we get.
Yeah.
And so what I was going to say, where this all stemmed from, is there was a crunch point where I think that the expedition of plot points began, and that was when the Threefold Spark showed up. I don't think the Threefold Spark stuff was going to kick off until like a year or 2 from now. I would wager a nickel. So when Exarchon showed up in the present. Also, I guess I should say, like, we're going to probably... I'm a few months behind, so I just felt like it's okay for me to talk spoilers, because I'm a few months behind. So,
I'm assuming this is sort of an end of the road discussion, so I'm not really taking an approach of spoilers.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk of it once it's all done and I've read all of it as well, I should say. So, like... But when Exarchon appeared in the present, and then specifically when Exarchon took over Dezoris' body, which is the last issue I read... where that was the ending. That to me was like, that's the big crunch point. And I think everything from here on out is going to feel more structured, because I feel that was the thing that got shoved right into what we were reading as far as like making things move. And given that, I'm like, that's fine, because it feels like that was meant to be like a massive plot point years from now, but that's fine. Like, knowing the context of what's going on, I'm like, okay, yeah, if you have to expedite the ending, clearly Exarchon's arrival was meant to be a huge thing for this, and is the, like, if we have to do one big plot point, that's the one we're going to do.
Well, yeah, I did manage to get up to date, so I'm plodding. I went from not having read it for 2 and a bit years to basically doing a binge there about 3 months ago. So I am all caught up. So for context, it's not quite the same as like binging phase 2 of IDW, which is literally like a couple of 100 issues, I think. So for anyone who wasn't aware, 2019 IDW, primarily written by Brian Ruckley. However, there are 2 or 3 little things that have other writers. You got the main book, which is currently sitting at 42 issues, with 43 being the final number, including, and then there's going to be one sort of bumper-sized semi-annual book called Fate of Cybertron. Then that's by Brian Ruckley, who I had the pleasure of talking to, and has a fantastic nature podcast.
Hell yeah. Then
there's Transformers Galaxy, which is essentially was kind of like a more what Spotlight was marketed as, which was tight, character-focused stories. Originally looked like it was going to go on for a good long while, but ended up being a year run.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 writers were on that. Tyler Blinsky, Catlett, and Cohen Edenfield were a team, and then Sam Maggs did Arc 3, and then Brandon Easton did the final art. Lots of different artists on all of these. Kind of for the main book, the most important artist would be Angel Hernandez or Angwell Hernandez. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce that. And Kashet Whitman, who did the original arc. And then afterwards, Anna Malkova and Bette McGuire-Smith came in. Big fandom names before then.
Yep.
And sort of took over most of the art duties for the book. Galaxies has a ton of artists. Alex is on there. I think Andrew's on there. One I will name here, Umi Meow, who I love their art. Their art is fantastic.
Also, I will give a shout out.
Transformers.
On Galaxies, also had, I think, a really good Livio run on the Constructicon story.
Yeah. Oh, I have a lot to say about the Constructicon story, but we're going to be talking about that. Transformers Escape, which was a miniseries sort of filling in the Insecticon element of the story. Written by Brian, art was by Bette McGuire-Smith. Then Wreckers, Tread and Circuits, which was written by David Mariotti, who is the editor for the books and came in at the tail end of IDW 1. Illustrated by Jack Lawrence. I think it was Jack's first thing since Lost Light wrapped up. And then War's End, which is the current book. That is Brian's writing that. Jack is back on the art for that. Although I will say it doesn't feel very Jackish at times.
I have not. I have not checked out.
Don't know how better to phrase that.
I have not gotten to check out any of War's End because that's post Amazon. So I'm going to have a binge of my own very soon when I dive into all that. I've also been. I admit I've been putting it off a little bit because I am kind of sad that IDW 2 is ending, even though it is, I think, having a decently structured ending. I am kind of bummed out it's ending this way. And so I was putting it off a bit because I was like, the longer I put it off, the longer the continuity is alive. But I gotta go in now that we're this far in.
2 years later, read the issue. I'm not reading it! Can't make me. We then had a couple of ones off. We had the annual, which was drawn by Alex Milne, and Brian did the writing on that. And then the Valentine's Day special, which was art by Jack. 2 stories. One about what were they? Glyph and Tap Out, written by Patrick Ayres, art by Jack Lawrence, and the other one, which was written and art by Sarah Pieta de Rocher.
Hell yeah!
The Ferrero Rocher of Transformers artists, who everyone should love. I think it's the first time writing something about Cosmos and Blastoff, which I got too excited. I got too excited about Blastoff because I was like, "Oh no, Cosmos, run!"
Blastoff means well, but Blastoff is inherently toxic. Just flee.
Yeah. That is the best way to put it. So, like, for 4 years, I was thinking about it. It seems small enough, but it also seems, like, packed. Because, like, each of those have quite large issue runs. Like, between Galaxies and the main book, you're over 60 issues.
Yeah.
Then that's Brian's made a significant dent in the Transformers writing circles. Like he's gone way further than 90% of writers who've come on, not artists, writers. Because when Transformers locks in on a writer, they don't get to leave. They're just stuck there.
Well, and this is already me going into the Defender. And the thing is, I'm not actually much of a Defender person because with IDW2, a lot of the critiques are not actually wrong. It's just that I don't take them as hard as a lot of other people tend to who level them. However, one that I will always kind of stand by is those issues feel packed because they are. I have never agreed with the notion that nothing happens in IDW2. It's just that the plot is not always bombastically running forward. Whenever it isn't, the books are just chilling out, showing you what IDW2 is as a world, and that's not everyone's thing. Especially when the delivery is not, like, again, bombastic. But that's why I enjoyed the opening year so much, is that as slow as it moved plot-wise, which even then I don't think was super duper slow. It was just kind of, it was doing its thing. I think that the 2 issues a month thing didn't do a lot of favors as far as the issue to issue delivery, but it was constantly just like I felt bombarding me with like, oh, here's how the world works in IDW2, and I've always felt that was the best decision to make, being the continuity that happened just after Unicron issue 6, basically. Or I thought Unicron issue 6, and then I think the Optimus Prime issue might have been the very last one.
It was Unicron issue 6, and then Optimus and Lost Light's final issue came out.
Yeah, that after those.
So technically, Unicron's the third last issue, but then Lost Light and then Optimus.
Yeah,
that's the way it went.
And I think coming off, like having to go after those 3 final issues, basically, the best decision to make is to basically just kind of lay us down on a padded chair, nice cushioned chair, and go like, hey, let me tell you how this place works. Also, a good decision is also Brainstorm's dead. So Brainstorm, very beloved character in IDW1 who had a very lengthy storyline. I think one of the best things to do, we're just not even going to try to do another Brainstorm. We're gonna just remove him. We'll do someone else. There are so many other characters. You don't need to immediately tell us why this Brainstorm's not your Brainstorm. And I think that was, and I'm sure that wasn't like the motivation, but to me that was a very strong decision. That, and also going like in the opening pitch, right? I think in one of the first pieces of ad copy, going like, Cybertron is the hub of all intergalactic trade and commerce. And I was like, I am immediately interested, because that is absolutely not the state of Cybertron in IDW1 at any point in that continuity. Like, I think from like day one, any race that encountered Cybertronians in IDW1, it never went well from like day one. It was always bad.
No, because it starts off and it's the sort of Stone Age, Bronze Age kind of guys who are all like kill each other and then everyone else. Then it goes into the Functionist and Expansionist eras, which are essentially, you have stuff, we want your stuff, give us your stuff, we're bigger than you.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the war, which is half of them want to save you and half of them want to occasionally eat you. And then it goes into the post era, which is like, hey, we mean well now, go away.
Yeah, we mean well now. We've also
point...
genocided literal planets by accident. But we remember
that one time by Prowl wasn't an accident.
Well, it's also like, and we remember totally, except for the times we don't, because our brains actually don't retain information infinitely. So we might have just forgotten that we killed your planet.
Yeah, and there's been so many of you.
Yeah, and you're also small. So, IDW2, I always have stood, and this is not like something that I would say, and people are like, okay, I see your point, because even people who agree with this are like, you're not wrong, but it's still not for me, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But I've always really liked that IDW2 just went straight into going, like, here's how this new Cybertron works in a pre-war period where it is also thriving in the intergalactic community. So it's like, it was to me all a very fresh environment, and also I've been a big proponent from day one that we started, and I was so happy about this, literally one in real life year, basically, before the war even started, because pre-war Cybertron is always flashbacks and prologue, and it's always a paragraph of text, and then at best a couple stories that remember the old days for an issue or two. And for better and or for worse, I think it is awesome that we actually got to spend, and I think it was a calendar year. I can't quite remember because of the double issue months.
So the first, the war didn't kick off until issue 25 officially. The conflict started emerging. Like, conflict became more and more open. But it wasn't until issue 20 that you knew, like, lines in the sand were fully drawn, and then 25 is the kickoff, I believe.
Yeah, so, 25 is the big one, right?
In real time, probably about a year and a half.
Yeah, like, over a year of pre-war. Oh, I love it. And I have had people literally tell me that specific point is why they didn't like the book, and I'm like, that's fine, our tastes are different, I'm not going to tell you to like what I like, but I think that what I would argue outside of taste is that this is so unique in Transformers fiction to spend this long in this period, and it is also, I think, uniquely the place of Transformers comic books to be able to exist in that space that long. That I love that decision, and it also, like, frankly worked for me as well. Like, there were so many moments in the opening, like the pre-issue 25 era, I had fist pump moments, and they were smaller because they got me excited about what was going to happen. Like that moment when Megatron, and I haven't got anything on hand to reference, I should say. I'm doing all this off the top of my head, but like, I remember one of the moments that really I just loved was when Megatron just wrecked his office, and then Soundwave was. Soundwave's like, by the way, Optimus is waiting for you in the green room in the hall. You got a call from Optimus, and then Megatron's just standing there in his wrecked office just for a beat, and goes like, "Yeah, I'll be right there." I love this version of Megatron where it's like he's not a revolutionary, he's not a misunderstood a miner who is uprising against the powers. He is a politician who thinks he's a revolutionary. And something about it, because also, again, what would be the worst decision to make? We're going to try to do J-Rose Megatron again, but from the start. Because all that would happen is people saying, well, this isn't like this, and this. So just do a different Megatron. Do a garbage politician Megatron. That resulted in me just enjoying watching a Megatron who, instead of, plotting and scheming this uprising, he thought he was smarter than the almost literal psychopaths he was trying to quietly keep one hand on. And it's like, it turns out he wasn't smarter than them. He just became one of them. Like the whole thing of him like trying to be like, no, I'm with the Ascenticons, and then secretly, oh yeah, the Rise, they're gone, but also secretly, I'm so smart, I can make the Rise secretly do what I want for everything to turn out fine. And then in issue 25, you see the end result of that, which is, instead, I had to launch a coup, and then I didn't actually tell them to kill Sentinel Prime. I had the Rainmakers, who appear to be homicidal maniacs who don't talk, and they just killed him anyway. So, like Megatron in IW2 has this perpetual improvisational aspect to him that I kind of enjoyed. Not to like jump ahead, but like to me, all of this also works with the idea. Just the whole tone of this was like, we're never going to get to Earth. Like IDW2 isn't about getting to Earth; it's about everything that happens before we get to Earth. Which as a setting also like kind of excited me. But anyway, I'm going on tangent after tangent because I get excited talking about IDW2 because, as you said, and as is correct, a lot of people don't talk about it that much. So I get hype whenever I get to kind of unload about what I like about it.
I was actually thinking about specifically people talking about it this week, and just like when I look back 3 or 4 years ago, not the Lost Light era, because Lost Light era phase 3 is when things started getting contentious really in the fandom about like people started saying like some books are bad, some books are good. Where it was like right in the smack dab in the middle of phase 2 is when like you couldn't get away from talk about one book or the other. And Lost Light, you'd get more arguments, but people were still talking about it. Past the first year, the conversation about this book died down, and I've asked people about what they think about it, and I can't tell you if it's because no one's reading it or if there's just no, like, people don't feel it's discussable or whatever. But listen, I had a minor podcasty public breakdown about I'm not reading these books anymore and you can't make me, which again made me leave these books for 2 years, and I entirely blame my rather bad relationship with Brandon Easton as a writer for that. But I want to start with something positive because I think you highlighted something really important. I think Brian is one of the best broad strokes world builders we've ever had.
I would agree very quickly.
I think his concepts for what Transformers are, how their society works, their approach to the afterlife, their approach to dying, these are brilliant. The idea that like older Cybertronians, maybe not always, but frequently like start merging back into the planet. Like essentially becoming one with the Allspark means like literally becoming one with the Allspark. Like you literally like become part of it. his idea of how new Cybertronians are born and how they're raised, and like you're born with a mentor figure, and adding in the political element of, and because of the artificial energon shortage, we only birth one basically when it's politically expedient. Hey, we need to get an election right. Have a baby. Here's a baby. Look at the. It's like.
So you read the Cliffjumper Galaxies issues, right?
Yes, I love those.
That
issues.
opening
They're great.
when Sentinel Prime is just like making a phone call and he's like, another one came out and everyone's left already, and I'm gonna look like a fool if we don't hide this thing that got birthed. And Cliffjumper's like, sorry, I got born. Like, it's so good.
Like, is that why he looks like Bumblebee?
Yeah, he's just like, Cliffjumper was this accidental afterbirth.
Is he his twin? Is he literally his twin?
I think it's left ambiguous, but it's like Cliffjumper might have been in another tweak of timings, would have been Bumblebee's twin, but instead he came out just late enough to be considered an irritation by Sentinel Prime. But the world building is so strong in this book. I will say also, one of the reasons I had some initial aggro at the Netflix series is because of the kind of, I found muddled press releases. I thought Ruckley was writing on the Netflix series for a good hot minute. And so I was kind of hyped. I was like, oh, is everything on IW, is that Netflix series going to be like a cartoon, but this? Because that would be cool. And then it wasn't. And that was a bummer. And also, like, a little thing I'll say, everything that Netflix series tried to do, I've always said Cyberverse did it better. Also, IDW2 kind of did it better, as far as, like, creating believable actors in this story. But yeah, the world building of that book, just the nature of how birth and death works. Yeah, the way that it's not like, oh, and then it's not this Tolkien-esque, oh, then they go and resurge back into the planet. It's like the sheer discomfort whenever Optimus or someone would go to visit someone who was merging back into the planet. I forgot the term for it now. The incumbents. And like this way that it was like this almost chilling thing to talk to someone who's alive, but the version of them that you knew is so dead that like it's like they're not dead, but it's almost worse to try to talk to them.
Because they're not like you're getting a response from, essentially you're getting a response from the Borg, for want of a better term. Except like it's a Borg,
Yeah.
And it's like you're waiting for that little flicker of who they were to pop up, and it does, but doesn't, like, you just get this cacophony of responses. Like, it's a fantastic idea. It's an absolutely brilliant idea. Another one, like his approach to the different political groups was good. The idea of the artificial energon shortage, and it's essentially an anti-expansionist move, is an interesting one. His approach to the Sea of Rust, the Worth. I mean, in terms of ideas, I could go on about Brian as a world builder for ages. I think he's got some of the best ideas we've ever had in terms of broad, like the actual biology of these things. Because, like, if I look at, say, John or James, what they were really good is making these, okay, we're doing world building in the context of the individuals, in the context of how these relate. Like, you found out how a spark was born because it related into your characters. Here you find out how people are born because it relates into the world. Yeah. It relates into the concepts of these ideas. And I think that is where Brian absolutely shone. Absolutely shone.
Yeah, and I would even say, like,
go on.
Well, when the execution would falter here and there, that's why I still kind of stuck up for it, because I was like, yeah, like sometimes this isn't executed, to the best degree. But what will linger? What we're going to talk about, 10 years from now, isn't going to be the execution. It's going to be the concepts, and ideally, some of these concepts will linger and bleed into the kind of monomyth that is always under Transformers, because they're. It's just such good ideas. At least I hope some of these ideas form the basis of, like, if we're going to approach like a multi-timeline approach to Transformers of sorts, I would love for these concepts to be the roots of at least one or two timelines. Like, just the one where this is how Transformer society works versus, say, the Functionist universe, where everyone's like, filed into a box. And this was almost like a friendly dystopia, because it wasn't dystopia. and it wasn't Functionist, but you had a friendly guide who would meet you when you're born and walk you through how society works and go like, okay, so we're not going to put you in a box, but, pick a box on your own time, but figure out what you're going to be. And it's kind of like, yeah, this is nice, but also the moment you don't fit into the system, and I think that was quietly one of the cool things about the Cliffjumper story, is like, the moment you don't fit into the system, also the Constructicons, right? The Insecticons. The moment you don't fit into this system...
Any outliers, they're not, removed, but they are just like, if you're an outlier, you need to be put out of the way of the general public, because they don't need to think about you.
Yeah, it's almost worse than a dystopia. And I won't go straight into it, but also, this is also another thing I loved about IDW2. We finally got a fleshed-out, multi-layered Sentinel Prime, to a certain degree. At least as far as not being a cackling supervillain, but, like, he is an effective soldier who is put into the position of planetary leadership, and he did so in a way that suited his personality, and he's an asshole. And that's how he ran the planet. I think that's it.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to stay a little positive for the moment. It's all building. But, some of the characters Ruckley did take on. I thought Sentinel was a good take. I like probably the best did for Skywarp what John did for Thundercracker, in a way. Like, not the same degree, will say, but like, hey, he's got a personality.
Yeah, I think IDW1 Skywarp eventually reached that at the very end.
Very, very, very end. And you had to be reading G.I. Joe.
Yeah, it was entirely on the back of G.I. Joe, because Skywarp for years in IDW2, like Phase 2, had a role that could have gone somewhere, which is, please stop using me as a warp engine, basically.
Yeah,
but then it kind of, there were so many characters that he ended up falling through the cracks, and yeah, like, I could see it bouncing off some people, but I loved it when we met IDW2 Skywarp, because I was like, oh, this is like, and this is again going to my sadness of how this is all ending. He felt like one of my favorite things about IDW2, which is we don't have 2 or 3 factions. We have countless individual spinning plates who occasionally align, but they aren't like, I'm Skywarp the Decepticon. It's like, no, I'm Skywarp, the guy who was lost in a pseudo time jump for years and went insane. And I guess I work for some Decepticons right now, but I certainly am not like, I am Decepticon Skywarp. And he was one of those characters where I'm like, oh, like, he's like, he'll go away for a bit, but then when he comes back, it's going to be like, oh shit, it's Skywarp! Like, the IDW2 was built for oh shit, it's moments. For years to come.
Yeah.
And also, like, with some characters that didn't land for people, to me, the thing that they brought was, we're gonna see them later, though. Like Handsome Straxus, was like, right now, he's not really doing all, he's kind of odd, he sort of sticks out, and he's leaving, but I'm like, he's leaving, which means he's not on the Decepticons. He has it, like, he said it straight up, he's like, my priority are the people of my city, and we happen to own all of the off-world capable ships, and I'm putting all my people on these ships first, and then maybe I'll help you. And then, like, when he leaves, it's like he's not like, I'm leaving as Decepticon Straxus. It's like, no, I'm Straxus of my people, and we're all leaving, and maybe you'll see us again sometime. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be a few years from now, we're going to have the, oh shit, it's Straxus kind of moment. Which, we're not going to get now, but...
No. But no, like, also, like, doing halfway, like, Straxus as a halfway decent dude is actually pretty, like, again, that's something I expect from comics, to experiment with characters.
Yeah.
But we mentioned it there, and I, like, while we're talking about big ideas and good concepts, I really want to talk about Galaxies, before I do anything else, because apart from the fact, like I said, the Brandon Easton stuff got me so vitriolically mad, I left the series for 2 years. I basically couldn't read the first issue all the way through of his Ultra Magnus story because I got so mad at his approach to language, which was basically, have you heard of the 1980s? I love them. And it didn't help that anytime he's touched anything with Transformers, I've gotten really unpleasant feelings about it. But that's just a personal bugbear. But we don't agree on things. But I really want to start, like, Tyler Belinsky did the first stories, and like I said, we had the Cliffjumper story, we had the Gage story. 3 very good stories, I think. But I really want to touch specifically on the Belinsky one, which was, I think, strong contender for best combiner story ever told. I can't think of a single story we've ever had, including the event books called literally Combiner Wars, that put so much focus on who these people are, what this is doing to them, and what a combiner is. This is an idea I've had myself for years, and I'd wish, like, I really wish this would deal with it. Like, what happens to Devastator? What happens to Superion when they're not combined? And the idea that the first time they merge, it's kind of we're still us. They're just kind of like all piloting a big mech suit, and then they slowly realize they're being watched from inside their own minds, and they start feeling him pushing against them, and it's like, there's 6 of us, and it's like, no, there's 7 of us. And the story, like, they're afraid of him. They're afraid of what this thing is going to do, and the one brief time it breaks out, it's completely out of control. And that's what, like, it's not just like they're afraid there's another person in there. It's just like, he's stronger than we are. What will happen if he takes over? Like, the implication, are they afraid that they'll never come back from it? And eventually they give in, and Devastator is fully his own individual. None of this wee crap that you sometimes get with combiner writing. It's Devastator is an amalgamation of these 6 individuals who has his own ego, id, drive, everything else, and he will always be in the back of your mind. And something I do like, they did it without the IDW1 effect of, like, and they're all kind of slowly turning into each other, which is something I really liked. But this was like, no, they're still them, but everything they do is driven now by this drive to rejoin and be together, and people are so afraid of what Devastator, not the 6 Constructicons, what Devastator will do. They won't even let them eat properly. They're starving them.
Yeah.
And then bringing in the Insecticons as a horror story, which Brian would pick up again, I think pretty effectively in Escape. The Insecticons as this horror story of, like, Livio. I love Livio's art, and I think he was perfect for this. And then, like, they were born, and it turned out, like, lots of Cybertronians have individual powers when they're born, and these guys, they could turn matter into energy, really potent ultra energy. And eventually they realized that they were used to clean up stuff, and now we're cleaning up in the middle of the threefold spark war. Oh, we could eat people. Huh.
Yeah, how good,
we're not doing
good
any
a horror
harm.
concept was that? Where it's like, oh, they can eat matter and reconstitute into energy, and then one of them goes like, we ate a body the other day and it tasted good. And it's like, that's such good stuff! I love it so much! To the point, I almost felt they almost took over that story. Like, they kind of took that book away from the Constructicons a little bit, because, like, I like the Constructicon story, but, like, when you give me that kind of Transformers horror, it's like, oh, now I'm just kind of waiting to, and then they had them interact in a really cool way, but I was also like, oh, this was, like, secretly the Insecticon origin story.
Yeah. I really, really liked the Insecticons, and like, it was about, ultimately, it became about Bombshell manipulating the Constructicons into giving them a feeding frenzy, for want of a better thing. Which, again, I'm going to stay on this, like, spin, but as much as I like the Cliffjumper story, and Depsaurus was great, and I really like the Gage story with Heretic and RC and the rest, what I really like looking back on it now is this then is picked up by Brian in Escape, who continues that horror aspect with a different artist, which I think kind of toned it down a little bit at times, but then, like, they'd be, like, eating the face off something, and it was, like, really graphic. But this horror story of, now they've discovered that organics taste better.
Yeah.
And they're so desperate for it, they are attacking tiny little space rats. And, like, they're swarming the remaining organics on Cybertron, who are already, like, under lock and key, and they're suffering so much, and they're being forgotten in the middle of this war. And then you have Hound in the middle of it trying to do it, and then you have this horror of this ever-encroaching swarm of cannibalistic monsters that will devour everything. It's like literal swarm of locusts. And then like that, I will say, I think, and I will explain why in a bit, Escape is the best thing Brian ever wrote. I think if you could give Brian the format of Escape, like if you kept him on books like that, I think any of the complaints would go out the window, because I think he was controlled, focused, tight, he did good character work, he got the horror aspect, there was good world building, like the conversation Hound had with that Organic about like, we like you, but we don't understand you, because you do not function like us. You're really cavalier with the idea of you dying because you lived for so long you can't fathom it. Like, which is just such a lovely concept. And Wheeljack not getting what a child was, and Leviathan finally doing a bit more. Those two stories are when I think this run was at its absolute strongest, because I think Tyler should come back immediately and continue writing. Like, that was a fantastic story on a concept I wish had been analyzed. And I think Escape was Brian at his utter best. I don't think anything he did in the main book compares to how well he did in Escape. The worst thing I can say about Escape is that I wish someone would take the dictionary off him, because no one says tumult in a sentence. No one.
I like.
It's like when I was reading Maximum Dinobots once, and Grimlock said something, I paused and just like, what the fuck does that mean, Simon? So I'm just like, no dictionary for you.
I like learning a word now and then, though. I like learning a word.
Now and then is fine. Every time,
I have fun with it. It depends, I think, on the delivery. I also will. This is. I'll just throw us in briefly, because I don't know where we'll get this one in, but because you brought it up, and I want to mention. I think that one of the things Ruckley did so well that also led to, like, you know, as to paraphrase a little bit, like, to some weaker work on the main book, is that I think it's hard to get across how much he had to basically build this world from scratch in a way, while doing the main book, so that when you get to something like Escape, I think part of what makes Escape so good is that it's within. Part of what makes Escape so good, and a lot of the last like year and a half so good, is that it was the culmination of all that buildup of the, you know, what people call the slower book, basically. And I think it's really hard for me to see that book being like Escape while designing this world from issue one. I think it was necessary for it to be a little bit more unfocused and etc. when the goal was to create this larger canvas of ideas that then something like Escape would just bombastically explode out of. Which is also why I think that especially the first year of IDW 2, I think would have landed better as a graphic novel a year later. I mean, I think there are plenty of reasons why I wouldn't have, but having weighed the idea in my head off and on, I think it would have landed better, because it would have been like, here is a volume story that will introduce us to the world through Rubble, and we won't spend months with Rubble. Instead, you get this big story that maybe culminates in Rubble's demise, and then we move into the monthlies. And I think that might have hooked people in a little bit stronger, but I felt like I wanted to throw it in there, because I agree with you that Escape is like super. I don't know if Escape is literally what I would call the highest point for my tastes, but it is absolutely a high point, and also there's plenty of things I could go on about with Escape, but I want to do I'll do the Defender has logged in bit for a moment and say, like, I think Escape's strengths are built on the back of necessary sacrifices in the opening year of writing. Just it's because it is so much to have to start spinning the plates for us to then enjoy the spinning plates once we get to something like Escape. But going back to Galaxies, the other thing I'll throw in there, because someone's going to yell it, is I do think we had a good combiner story in IDW 1 about the nature of combiners, but it was just tremendously brief, and it was the Bruticus story, which was less about Bruticus and more about the Combaticons.
Yeah, no, I was about to say, I think Bruticus is a tail end of that. I don't think that's a good combiner story. I think that's we're looking at these individuals as characters for the first time, really, story. Because like Bruticus doesn't really matter in that book.
Yeah,
but
Bruticus,
the fact they combine is not the important thing.
Well,
there.
yeah, like Bruticus is a thing that happens to them as opposed to another character. And but I think it is like conceptually it is still some of the coolest combiner stuff that we had ever gotten as far as like you know, what happens to these.
Tau is amazing. Tau is an amazing.
And like what happens to these guys, especially like what happens to them when one of their friends is brain dead and then they combine for the first time, and like how much that messes them up, like, and the way that it had like lasting effects on Brawl in perpetuity. But yeah, like this I loved the opening two things of this, also because and my biggest love in IDW 2, and I've yelled about this for over a year now, is Termagax. I adore the Termagax stuff in IDW 2, and the whole part of the Constructicons aspect of that is how in other stories the enigma of combination is a thing that we find and then it happens to someone. In IDW 2, Termagax, it doesn't happen to someone. Termagax goes like, "Hey, try this out." Hey, the enigma of combination. Hey, you guys, try this out. You know, and trying to foster it for the sake of growth and for the sake of avoiding a status quo. And then, you know, that leading to what you described. And there's so many moments in this book. Sentinel Prime with the champagne glasses and the Medals of Honor before shipping them to a moon was so pitch perfect. That's one of my favorites. So, you know, we talked about a lot of folks fell off of IDW 2, and I feel people fell off of IDW 2 as it got better, which I found so frustrating. And it's why I was always so excited to talk about it. This is one of my favorite things to tell to people who haven't read it at all, is like the scene of like, what happened to the Constructicons? Well, they fixed everything, and they learned how to combine, and it was deemed irregular and a little scary, so President Sentinel Prime gave them champagne and Medals of Honor and a ceremony, and then shipped them to a moon on a great mission where they just stayed on the moon underfed and perpetually trapped in bureaucracy and not able to come back home forever. Because that's who the Sentinel Prime was. He'll give you a medal, like, no, you did great, hey, hand on your shoulder. Personally, you have impressed me. But I have a mission for you on that moon over there. And, you know, how this was our first glimpse of that. And then we find out how many times he's done this as IDW 2 went on. This story did so much. It introduced like how Devastator and Combiners potentially in perpetuity work in this universe, but also without being a Sentinel Prime story, we got such a look into just how much of an asshole this guy is, while meaning well in his own way. We got to look at how like who Termagax is, and how I have a case to make, which is that IDW 2 is in a way the Termagax continuity, because many of its deviations from your usual rote Transformers backstory is on the back of Termagax. And this was kind of our first glimpse of that as well. And then obviously, like I think I popped on Twitter when I got to the pages with the Insecticons, when Bombshell's faceplate slid back, when he again, this is one of my favorite moments to share with people, because I feel this is one where it's like, this is, you know, a spoiler for an issue, but from year one, right? So at this point, I'll just say it to someone to get them interested, is like the scene where Bombshell, he cerebro shells someone just so that they'll sit still and not make any noise while he literally eats them alive.
Yeah.
It was so friggin' beautiful. It was just perfect Transformers horror. And also, such a clever way to make the Cerebro Shell all the more terrifying. It's not like, oh, he controls your actions. Like, no, he might just make you stand there and keep your mouth shut while he kills you. And not in a nice way. Not while he shoots you with his laser gun. Yeah, like and I said this earlier, but I think some of the best Transformers panel work Livio has done, who you know is an artist in panel work that gets a lot of, you know, divisive discussion and not unearned. You know, not entirely unearned, but I think that Livio's work in this was really really good. And like you said, a perfect tone for how to meet the Insecticons specifically. Like Galaxies. I don't know if we want to just like if we're talking just about Galaxies as a whole, because I can go on a little bit.
Yeah, we can.
Because obviously for a lot of folks, I think the first 3 of the 4 Galaxies things were the best ones. Because I would not disagree with you that the 4th arc, the Ultra Magnus arc, was the weakest part of Galaxies. I don't think I disliked it as much as you do, but not to the point where I'm going to...
No one dislikes it as much as I do.
I'm not going to also go like, well, Mikey, let me tell you why it's actually great. Because I enjoyed a bunch of it, but it is definitely one where I enjoyed the bullet points a little bit more than the execution. I didn't like, obviously it didn't hit me the way that it hit you, but I could see your reaction being a reaction to getting through it. The Cliffjumper arc, I think the Cliffjumper arc's actually my favorite of the 4, even though I like a lot of the Constructicon one more. The Cliffjumper arc is like, in a way, more surprising, because it leans into stuff that Transformers usually doesn't turn into plot points, like that Cliffjumper is Red Bumblebee, and going all out with it.
And he really is kind of sick of everyone telling him, hey, it's Bumblebee. And just like, no, it's not Bumblebee. I don't... Please, Bat Person, I'm not Bumblebee.
And that, like...
Bumblebee.
And, like, this wasn't ornery, tough guy Cliffjumper. This was like, I just want people to be happy that I was born once, Cliffjumper. And also, the odd couple pairing with Ambassador Deathsaurus is just also just the phrase Ambassador Deathsaurus is so amazing. Getting to see another planet, like it's sort of, as a sci-fi concept, planet of blind bat people is not like the most deep idea, but it still is an entire little civil. It felt like a really good Next Generation Star Trek episode of like, we're gonna draw 2 words out of a hat and make that a civilization, but we're gonna flesh it out a little bit and show you who they are. And also showing, like, what this version of the Transformers do instead of being the Nova Prime expansionists. Like, this whole Ambassador thing, where it's like, this actually kind of is the Nova Prime thing, but worse, because the bad stuff is happening quietly rather than loudly. So I like that story a whole lot. And the Gage story I enjoyed. The only thing about it is that was where Galaxies, I think, became more like Escape, I guess is how I'd put it. Because the Gage story and the Magnus story were, to me, a whole lot more ancillary to the main book's current goings on, as opposed to it felt like the first 2 stories were like, these are just contained stories in this world. The next 2, these are what you read alongside the main book. And I don't mind that, because obviously Escape is literally that, and I think it's pretty good. But it was also a shift in Galaxies that left me kind of unsurprised that Galaxies ended, basically. I'm just looking at the wiki page, was literally replaced by Escape, because it's like, yeah, that's basically what this was becoming. I think the idea was, instead of having lots of miniseries, there would just be Galaxies as where the Escape stories happen, and then I think at a certain point, and there's no way to predict this, right? But at a certain point, Galaxies became a victim of having the same title, where people were like, wait, so why does this have nothing to do with the last issue I just read? And it's like, okay, maybe people prefer to actually just have these with different names. Like,
I could very much believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a shame, because as a persnickety person who likes folder structures in computer data drives, I prefer things just being under Galaxies, because it's easier to keep track of. But whatever works for people. But yeah, I have lots of good stuff to say about all those stories, which I'm trying to also be a little brief, just because we're looking at all of this, and I mostly want to just love bomb a lot and also try to validate your critiques as much as possible, because I don't want to be mean. You mentioned it though earlier, and it's relevant to the Gage story. I love the political factions in this. I love that Heretic, a joke from a panel, was very logically turned into the religious political party leader.
He's an evangelist. he's a whatchamacallit, West something Evangelus.
Yeah,
he's just like, I am so into God, I'm wearing it on my
yeah,
forehead.
and then you find out like, oh, and also you don't care. You're a total piece of garbage, as one would hope, right?
True to life.
But also, just to take Heretic and actually make him into something, because that's what Heretic was. He was a joke name with a joke design. He was a joke in a panel, and I like him as a joke. So something that IDW2 has done with a couple of characters is take an IDW1 designed character, debuted character, and just worked them in as treating them as evergreen in a way. They did this with Freud in the main book as well. Just having Freud be like, no, he's just a character in the book. And treating him in the same evergreen manner, I thought was kind of cool. And seeing that with Heretic in this was a lot of fun. Just knowing that the Cybertronian Senate wasn't technically the Autobots and the Decepticons, but they're politicians. That there were a whole lot more of them, and quote unquote factions, is another thing I loved about this continuity. But yeah, I should pass the hat back over to you to wherever we want to go, because I can just keep going on and on.
Right. So unfortunately, I'm out of nice things to say.
So I will start. It is time to unleash. I'm going to open my chest and reveal the Matrix of Love Bomb.
I like Thermogax.
Okay.
I like Thermogax. I also like the design of Thermogax. But I just want to, because I don't want to give an impression to someone listening that's like, oh, Mikey just likes the whole thing, he's being a bit snarky, and just like, I have huge problems with how Brian told the main story.
To set it up, I would love to end on Termigax, because Termigax, as I have alluded, is my favorite thing about this entire continuity. So
absolutely.
We should cycle back. Let's cycle back around to Termigax, because I want to go into, because I want to go into some more negative stuff that you've got to say, and also because as I said earlier, I think there are absolutely solid critiques about this. I just found the most common critiques I would hear were ones that I found kind of irritating at a certain point. Like one of them, and let me add also, if dear listener, if this is one of your critiques, you don't irritate me. This I'm talking more about the mono voice.
He's lying.
But like for instance, I'd often hear like, oh, there's no action in this book, and I'd always go like, I'd be like, well, how much did the action of IDW1 matter compared to what people loved about it? Like, action happened in IDW1, but it's not like IDW1 was an action book. And then 2, when everyone started dropping off, like, I read issue 25 and then read some going, oh, this book is just not, it's not enough action in this book. And I'm just like, I don't know what you want. I think that you guys are hearing someone else say that, and you're just parroting someone's critique you heard. Because IW2 has plenty of action in it. Sorry, but it does. Like, I don't know what else to say. The first year doesn't, because it's peacetime. And then when peacetime goes away, there's plenty of action. Like, it's not like people are transforming and shooting lasers page to page to page, but I feel there's an appropriate amount of action for the stories being told. And so I just want to get that one off my chest. That's the one that always would kind of make me just like sigh, because I'd have no engagement for this, because I feel like I'm reading a different book.
Yeah, people used to say that about RID and Optimus Prime to me, and I would just be like, that's not the book. That's not what the book's about.
Yeah, and
it's a political drama.
And also, action still happened. Like, that's the thing that drove me nuts, because it's like,
I will say, like, there was one panel I think is just fantastically framed, which is Skywarp doing his, like, to Slipstream... No, Jump Stream, and he was like, ha ha ha, I'm better than you and everything, and then just Skylinks behind him. That's just a fantastic action shot. Like, how that's framed. I love that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just to end my little grump session. The thing that bothers me is when we round down to 0 for the sake of making a more cartoonish point or a better headline point, because it feels like YouTube thumbnail meta, but in discussion, and I find it really irritating. So that's just me.
So when I started having some weird feelings about this continuity, it was pretty early. It was issue 6. We'd hit so I hadn't realized at the time that the format for a while was going to be 5 issues and then a follow-up story. 5 issues per arc, rather. I'm sitting there and just like, we're doing the Megatron Optimus thing. And at the time, I was kind of like, Megatron seems really petty, and it settled in like, that's the point, he is petty. But it struck me as I was reading that issue, what was going on in the last story arc, do you think? And I was just like, hang on, Rubble died. That was fun.
That was fun.
That was great. I messaged Brian and said, like, you did Game of Thrones better than Game of Thrones did. Because that was legit shock. But, and as the book went on, I was like, who's this character? What were they doing? And I think we were heading towards the 20s. Cyclonus showed up. And I literally spent like 2 minutes, because 2 minutes like setting up, was Cyclonus in the book before? And I was like, thinking back, and it was just like, he had the ghosts. Were they ghosts? Is he crazy, or are they supposed to be ghosts? Do we know? And it was really strange for me, because this had never happened before. In reading most comics, or certainly Transformers, because I can basically figure out by description what issue anyone's talking about from IDW1. I can almost do that for Dreamwave, and I don't like Dreamwave. But what made me realize is that the thing that Brian was doing so well, which was world building, had resulted, in my opinion, in this almost distant approach to character and plot. So he would introduce an idea. That idea would then be framed in the terms of world building. Once the world building had been set up, he would then move on to the next idea. And the idea, of course, as I read on, it was like he wanted to do the character spots and like, here's a character moment with Bumblebee, here's a plot moment with Bumblebee. We're going to leave this now, do something else, come back to this 3 or 4 issues down the line. But for me, that was so... It's not that the pacing was slow, it's that the pacing was disjointed to me. And I was like, how is it I can't remember Cyclonus, who looking back was a pretty big part of around, I think it was issue, because I checked this before to be sure, 9 or 10-ish, around then. How am I not remembering he was in the book? And it's Cyclonus, and I liked that take on Cyclonus. Like, I think so many of his character takes are really good. Like, I think his approach to Swindle is probably... I'm going to praise that later on. Also, Trick Diamond's in this. Fuck's sake, I love Trick Diamond. But,
Mikey, I thought you were supposed to be the guy who hates the book. What do you mean you like Swindle and...
I am a multifaceted diamond of a man. What struck me was this. Brian is primarily a novel writer. He has a lot of experience writing novels. And it really hit me like, this is framed like a novel. This is all laid out like a novel. Long exposition sections interspersed by short conversation sections. Certainly in sci-fi and fantasy, that's really, really common way of doing a book. And the problem was, it's not a book. It's not something where I can sit down for 5 days and read 1,000 pages and get Brian's great vision, which I do want to pick up his books. It's something where I'm reading it once or twice a month, and I have to reread it before I pick up the next one to remember the basics of what he wanted me to remember, because it wasn't sticking in my head. And when I came back for the read, I read it in a big lump. And I was like, okay, this will make more sense. It did, but not by much, because the problem with the structure was all there. I went back right to the start, reread from the start, and some things were sticking more, but when it hit me, like, I'd need to be reading this 3, 4, 5 times for this to gel, and I don't like this well enough. I found, for me, it's not, everyone goes Brian's pacing, it's slow, it's ponderous, whatever. It's not the pacing, it's the structure. I don't think Brian can write for structure for a big, long-form series like this, which I think is another reason Escape really highlights to me his strengths, because he didn't have the freedom in that story to take that languid time, to cut away from these characters, to basically let plot points drop off. He had to be tight, he had to be focused, and for me, it was reading Escape that really cemented this for me. Just like, oh, I love this book. This book is great. Why aren't I loving the rest? And then I sat down and really processed, like, the fact how little, considering how long it took for the story to get where it was going, how little Brainstorm's murder mattered. And I also, like, that made me start looking at what were mistakes in the story that I think made those bits matter. Like, I think the fact that so many characters were alive during the Threefold Spark was a mistake. Like, you're trying to frame it like a murder is so unthinkable for these people, but these people went through at least one war together. Like, that doesn't work for me. Like, this needed to be the generation after that, 2 generations down the road or something like that. The stuff building up to Thermogax was, like, Megatron's core character is fine, but he feels so at odds with himself in terms of, like, nothing he does gets him anywhere. He just sort of floats around, which in a tighter story would be fine, but because this isn't tight, we get to Thermogax, and I actually was like, Thermogax. Oh, right, Thermogax. Shockwave, I think, is the best example, because I forgot Shockwave was in the fucking book until recently. Because he literally disappears because of the way the book is laid out. And I was just like, shit, and he's showing up in the siege armor, which I love. Oh, I completely forgot you were here, dude. I forgot the Rise was the thing. Because the Rise is completely sidelined until very recently. And I can go on like that. Now, I'm going to say more positive things that I don't want to nail down, but if I have to pin down one thing that makes me go, I don't like this series of books, it's that kind of stuff. And then, unfortunately, like, it didn't help that the first miniseries I read since starting to reread was Treads and Circuits, which is basically all the problems I'm having with the main book by a different writer in a shorter frame. And it doesn't matter. And it has a knockout design that got me quite peeved. But so that's how I'm approaching this book. It's like, I don't want a lot of action. If you're telling a political story, do it. I would have loved longer before the war. I would like a 4-year run of pre-war stories.
I wanted 5 years
into what the society is. Yeah.
I wanted 5 years.
I think we got to the war
for the first year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we got to the war too fast. I had the idea a while back, just like, what this could have done that could have been really good is, like, instead of doing this long, continuous, we're in the months before war, we're in everything else, tell it with time skips. Tell, like, our first arc is this original day, like, Megatron and Optimus meet. Time skip, the world they're operating in, they've moved into politics. Time skip, how has the world changed? Show this world at its absolute peak, and then show it degrade, because Megatron's reason, in my mind, for starting the war is not a reason enough for a war, except it's framed like it's enough. It's framed like people are on the streets rioting about this, and I think if we'd had more build-up, more time for that build-up, we could have had I think the nuance would have been there, because I know Brian's idea for it is fine. It's just the execution. One more thing, I got to say it off the top of my head. Once we got past 25, I think the action became too much, because I actually think throwing in those action beats hurt the story, because the story stopped for like 2 or 3 issues for a fight scene. And one of the problems was you were trying to introduce 3 major world-ending apocalypses. And one of them you introduced in a miniseries which people may not have read. One of which you introduced at the end of an issue about Thermogax, which has no urgency to it because we never actually see the harm it's doing. And the other one, you kind of feel like it's been rushed on you. And obviously I've read ahead, so I know how the Exarchon thing is going, but I'm not in love with how it's going. Also, I really regretted getting rid of that Saurus, because he's functionally gone. You know, like, at least at the moment.
Well, that's why when I called it the big crunch point, I think part of that was like that, like, Exarchon taking over Deathsaurus is also Deathsaurus is gone. Deathsaurus was clearly being set up to have one of my oh shit it's moments. It's oh shit it's Deathsaurus moments.
Yeah,
and
he was going for a revenge arc. They were clearly setting that up.
Yeah, and that's why I called that the crunch point, because I was like, in this issue we have lost a clear setup arc in Deathsaurus going after Cliffjumper. And I think that issue is probably the crunch point of, like, to me. I'm expecting that is going to be to me at least the most intrusive. The book is ending now, kind of like moments. because it was.
Less intrusive than what we got in More Than Meets the Eye, or in Lost Light, I will say that. Less intrusive than that, because, God, James, you need to accept the fact sometimes you just need to let stories people haven't read in 4 years, just let it die. No one will forget. No one will forget. It would have been fine. I didn't need the Magnificents talking about how it was possessed by these space ghosts who I didn't remember.
I did want to briefly engage the time skip thing and say I would only be cool with that if we spent a year in each time period, because I think that the date...
Yeah, I'd have been very happy with like a long extended period in these time periods.
Yeah, because the danger to me of time skips is how quickly that can become like, oh, I want to get to the good part in like a writing sense, which would then turn the pre-war period into what we've always ostensibly had, which is like, this is a prologue, this is flashbacks, etc. Like, because I wanted to say, this is my review of Mikey's critique. Hi, I'm the Mikey reviewer. So the thing I really liked is that you finally, like I said, it's so hard to find people talking about IDW2 to even be able to start pulling apart the opinions that I hear, because I'm so happy you finally articulated the thing without it using the framing of the word pacing, because that's the other one I didn't want to be mean about, because it's like, I think that one's not as like inherently what are you talking about as the action thing, but like I was also getting so sick of it always seeing the word pacing and go, because I'd always go like, this is how it goes, oh but the pacing, me, yeah but the world building, and then that's the conversation. So the way that you have explained that critique actually helps me understand it better.
Because I have said pacing on Twitter and stuff like that, and that's just because, like, how the fuck do I explain that shorthand?
I think pacing does a disservice to the way that you just laid it out, because the way you laid it out makes so much more sense to me. And I'll frame this a bit better. The problem that you had, I didn't have, and when people kept framing it as pacing, I had so much trouble understanding what the problem was. Because what you described of like, because describing it as it's like a novel is a small epiphany for me, because you're absolutely right. Where I split off from that critique, and I think that's the critique a lot of people actually have. Where I split off is I never actually had the problem of I've never read an issue of IDW2 more than maybe twice, and I've never had a problem recognizing someone when they pop up, and I think it's just it happens to gel onto my brain in one layer in like a certain way. I think it's just the way that the world building is done and etc. The way the story's told, all of that happens to just grok with I grok it really easily. And I don't think there's any like skill to that. I think it happens to click with me pretty well, because I was gonna say before you mentioned your experience doing the like mass read, a friend of mine didn't read IDW2 and chose to wait for the trades and has read it only as trades, and has described, at least as I recall, has described the experience to me as being exactly what I was hoping, which is that a lot of those problems don't exist for them when they're reading it as trades. However, your critique is not... I have heard that critique before, again, framed as pacing in a way that confused me for a long time. I think it is... calling it a taste thing is not correct, but I think that the way the story has been delivered in that novel-style format, it either works for you or it doesn't. I think that there are just, like... It clicks with a personality or it doesn't. To the point where I would say... I think I'm happy it was done this way, but, I alluded to this earlier, I'm happy it was done this way because there is one writer who has apparently been tasked with writing 80% of this entire continuity in 1.5 ongoings, pretty much. I think that with only one ongoing, it was either this or a very action-oriented book that I think would have not landed nearly as hard. So I think that, because I think what we got was what you described. It either it lands for me, and it super doesn't land for you in a lot of places, which I think would be accurate. I want to make sure, like, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Like I will say, like, I know, like, I've spent years saying I wasn't enjoying this, but like, there are things I really like Swindle. I think Swindle should always have been like that.
Oh, I want to
like Swindle as part of a faction makes no goddamn sense when you think about who Swindle is.
Yeah, I want to make a nice focused love bomb sesh for Swindle and Trick Diamond for you in a sec. But just to finish the point I was making, so like I think that what we got, this novel style world building that is novel style for better and for worse, that in this case landed for me, did not land for you. It creates an environment where we hit something like issue 25, and then we have this mutually understood world that we then start having what felt to me like more granular in likes and dislikes, I guess I would say. I just feel that for better and for worse, that first year was necessary for what IDW2 is, and I think the only way for it to have been done better would have been for IDW2 to have had as much, I guess, shelf presence as IDW1 had. Because I don't really know how better to do this without compromising some of the stuff that I liked. Which is why I would say, like, I think this was kind of a... this is a cop-out phrasing. I don't like that I'm using this. But, like, you know, you can't please everyone, blah, blah. I don't want to use that kind of phrasing. But I don't know that there was a better way to do it without then losing stuff that I liked. And how do I put this? It's like, the more Mikey would have liked it, then maybe the less I would have liked it. So selfishly, I'm happy with what they did because I liked it, I guess. But no, this is also where I'll say, I think your critique is also completely sound because the way that you laid it out makes so much more sense to me than the kind of blanket statement of pacing. And I understand now why, not just for you, but for a lot of people, this was harder to stick with and, you know, just bounced off some folks. Because I totally understand how you could lose track of and just forget straight up characters in this. And I don't know what to say other than I didn't. And I don't think that means I read it better or anything. I think it just...
Your brain's bigger than mine. We've been over this for years.
Because I'm also sitting here going like, how do I say this without? Because I don't think I read it better than anyone. In fact, I demonstrably read it less times than you did. So like, I think it just has to do with like,
just like, you see, I approached reading like a skill, which I have and you don't. I'm just imagining now.
Yeah, I don't want it to come off that way because I'm trying to think of how to word it, but I think just because taste almost feels wrong too.
No, say what you like, dude.
Yeah, I think because I think taste also is almost to me as bad a blanket as pacing because it's like, well, we both like a whole bunch of it though. So I think it's a delivery that I think grok is the verb I would use, is either you grok it or you don't, and if you don't, it's not your fault. But I'm happy the risk was taken nonetheless because I grokked it, which is selfishly. That's kind of, I guess, the baseline is I grokked it, so I liked it. Also, okay, I want to let's alternate love bombs, I guess, because it sounds like we both like Termigax as well. So, yeah, Swindle and Trick Diamond. Yep. I think Headlock was in there too. The crew running that casino bar. I loved that. I'm kind of
yeah. Headlock was there.
Yeah, Headlock, by the way, one of my favorite character pulls because I love Headlock. Who never got a toy. I recently on a Hasbro Q&A Zoom call picked up Ground Pounder and held it at them while talking about characters that seem like they may have a chance to appear in Legacy. Because Ground Pounder got a toy. But yeah, the Swindle's Bar, I think, was a low-key, absolute linchpin in the thematics of what IDW2's story was, in, like, demonstrating that everyone didn't just become good guy, bad guy cartoon characters. Like, that Swindle's Bar was like, oh yeah, it's a Decepticon bar. Swindle couldn't give two rats' asses about the Decepticons. They are just useful. They are the ones who are in charge. And that it's not just Swindle. He's not like the singular con man in all of Cybertron. Because it's like, no, he's got I wouldn't even call them cronies, because I don't think Swindle's necessarily in charge. I think he's the most charismatic. And so he seems like he's in charge.
He's the one. He comes across as the one who just like said like, "Oh, I'll do you the best deal. I'll do you the best deal." And like Trick Diamond and the rest, they were just like it's not that they were naive. They were new enough to this that they weren't used to dealing with a proper con man, and now they're like they figure it out.
Yeah,
That's how it feels
yeah,
to me.
So the thing I loved about the vibe I got that I love so much is like, these are not Swindle's faction. All of these people are equally likely to turn on him when it becomes convenient. And then even it kept having this slower and slower reveal too. Like when we find out, oh, he also has VR. He has like virtual reality stasis chambers in his basement where friggin' Desaurus has been like on a permanent high for the last like 100 years or whatever. It's just such good ideas, and also good ideas where I don't mind that Swindle's basically got like wrecked where I left off the book last before Amazon took over Comixology, because I was like, Swindle's couldn't be there forever. It had to get wrecked. That vector point had to go away. But it was also such a good vector point for that part of the story. And I call it a vector point because that's also just getting a little bit more broad strokes. That's something I really like about IDW 2, is that it is, instead of being a series about characters in 2 factions, maybe 3, it is a sea of spinning plate vector points. And one of the big moments for me that made me love this continuity is after issue 25, those vector points didn't all become red and purple. They remained gray, and I love that so much, which I'm going to come back to with Termigax. But, yeah, I'm happy to hear you like Swindle, because I guess that's, you know what, I'll say it. I would have fought you on that if you were like, oh, this Swindle, what a bad Swindle. And I would have been like, Mikey, I'll fight you on Discord. Fist emoji. But yeah, I think I just ran myself into a wall, so I'm going to pass the speaking hat back over to you because I don't know where to go with that.
Yeah, which, you know, since we're going positive negative, I have to talk about a big negative for me, which is art decisions. Now, I didn't like Anwell's art very much. That's just a personal taste style thing. That's not an issue for me. Like, the guy drew the characters as best he could. Sometimes it works for sometimes an artist works, sometimes it doesn't. I have been like love bombing Livio Ramondelli since 2000 and Jesus. You know,
my favorite year, 2000
whatever.
And Jesus.
What what unfortunately got me was art decisions. One in particular, which was the choice, apparently made by IDW and the artists for a sense of continuity, not a mandate from Hasbro, to not just do the toys, but do the toys to a Netflix War for Cybertron level of accuracy, up to and including visible plug-in ports for effect parts, which, apart from the fact that sometimes led to hilarious moments, like when Megatron transformed and it's a crotch with a tank, really hit me. And this is where we might hit a thing where it's just like, it's not necessarily I would have hated this all the time. I hate it now because I may have made it mentioned once or twice. I'm a little on the rocks with the G1 aesthetic. Just a smidge these days. So I loved that IDW was able to have creativity and previously had creative approaches in terms of original designs. I loved, like, it led to some of our best designs we've ever had in the franchise, I think, and some of them got toys, more of them need toys. You know, we did a show about why I love IDW Grimlock's design. Then there were loads of original characters who had really inventive designs and everything else like that. But for this, it's the toys. It's toys that I'm already mad at because they're just being G1. And then at the time I was really afraid we were actually going to go into the Earth stuff too early, and then we were just going to get the Earthrise toys, which would make me madder again because the Earthrise toys it's sometimes really hard for me to like get past the fact that the Siege Cybertronian modes were basically just kind of Earth modes that we all kind of like whistled about. So it was this art choice that put me on the wrong foot, and I've never gotten past it. I think it's good they haven't been redesigned for the sake of the story because there was no reason to. I also think Optimus should absolutely have gotten a new body of some sort because it's a bit... It struck... The Orion Pax thing to Optimus Prime struck me as a little weird because it's just like, I'm Optimus now. That seems weird. Is that just what they... That's something I think should have been set up. Primes get their name changed.
Just
like,
just a
a whole name change for the Prime.
A quick one on Optimus. The reason this, I think I don't know how to explain this any better. The reason I didn't mind that is because he's a politician in this one, and for some reason that made me completely fine with it. I was like, no, but he's a senator. he's already. I don't know why, but senator versus cop or accountant or data guy. For some reason, Senator Optimus, or Senator Orion Pax into Optimus with just being a name change. Somehow, I was like, no, that's fine. And I really can't tell you why. But I know it is specifically in my brain. The connective tissue is, well, he's already a senator, so it's fine. And I think it's just like, in my head, I'm like, well, politician, Cybertronian, he probably already has a fancy body because politicians are, the upper class. Yeah. They're inherently scum.
Well, like I said, like if they'd made it a point, like everyone who takes on the Prime Mantle takes on a new name, I think that would have been a simple fix for me. But I also I was really grateful they used the Galaxy Force body and not the Siege body, the Siege Voyager body, because that's taking it too far for me, which is another reason I don't like the Netflix cartoon. And that was just something, it stuck with me. And whenever we got a new character introduced, they would always have their toy body if they had a toy. Which, for more obscure characters like Trick Diamond or Headlock or whatever, who are just using character models, or, Steeljaws showing up in Last Spot Standing based on a cover, which fucking shocked me. And that's just a toy design.
He has a cartoon. He has a cartoon design.
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah. Sorry. Steeljaw was the main villain.
That was Transformers Troy Baker pre My Voice is an NFT. Baker.
Yeah, I liked him as well pre NFT. It's okay. So I should probably remember the Steeljaw was in. I should
mention we are also now in a post My Voice is an NFT state of Troy Baker because he only held that up for a few days because the people did their work and.
If we could do that more. Not bully people online, obviously, but sort of remind everyone the whole NFTs thing is scummy. And killing the planet. But this artistic choice really stuck with me, and every time I've seen a design that looks like it's from a toy, I'm like, Chris McFeely once said online, he was like, I'm so glad we're at the stage where I'm seeing the toys as characters again. And I am so much more I want to see the characters as toys. I really love Flame toys because it's here's these cool designs, and now I've got a figure of them. I'm a lot less into, here's a toy, and now we're writing a character for it. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm sort of in the middle because, short answer is, it doesn't bug me. Which is kind of there's not much else I can really say because I'm so stop being bugged by it. Be more like me. But I do actually sort of feel Chris McFeely's point too. I kind of like that I'm not relying on, sadly now, literally one unofficial toy company to make comic character toys I like. And so, but also I also don't mind the last few years of toys. So I think that inherently I'm fine with it because I'm well, toys that I already dig are the toys of these characters I'm digging. So I don't have to. I can just go, hey, I really like this character. Cool, I got the toy already. All right, sweet, I win. So I don't mind that. But it's, that doesn't mean that your point is invalid because, it is a shift, and I think it is a shift that absolutely can bounce off folks, especially if you actually haven't been digging that War for Cybertron trilogy of toys, because then you're seeing toys that you're not really into all over the place on the comics. I don't mind the effect ports being on the designs because they're just greeble, technically. It's not like they're... How do I put this? I never feel like they are drawing a 3mm port. I feel like they're drawing a extended surface detail, if that makes sense. There's to me, there's a very fine line for that, which the Netflix series fell on the other side of, is how I'd put it. But in a very fine line kind of way, because I think it's completely valid to look at both and say this is the same thing. For me, they landed kind of differently. But I never really minded it that much. It does mean we got less Transformers eye candy, I guess, in that, look at this new design, or look at this new design. But then hey, on the most selfish level ever, It means Mastermind doesn't have an increasingly growing list of toy designs that we want to have them do. We have this nice contained list that will still probably take decades to ever finish if they continue existing.
Aileron, please.
Aileron Mastermind shouldn't have to worry about Aileron. Because Aileron, I went on about this recently somewhere, I don't remember where. Aileron is so friggin' toyetic from top to bottom. That is Hasbro's responsibility. That's the one I'm putting on Hasbro. Like that was a Griffith design, right? Was he, or did he just draw her a lot?
She was. When did she first show up? She first showed up in, I want to say, she showed up, like, obviously she was big in the Andrew Griffith days, but I'm trying to remember, did he create? He did, because she was one of the first people who greeted Optimus, and then she came over and was like, yay, you should all, she was basically a really friendly evangelist until Slug tried to set her on fire.
Well, I just remember, because I think Griffith wrote this on a tweet somewhere or something, but, like, she is top to bottom built to be a realistic, she's realistically made to feasibly be a toy in the Transformers line. Like, she's not doing crazy tricks or anything. She's full of character. She's fairly, like, simple as far as, like, how she transforms. That's on Hasbro. Hasbro should have made me an Aileron by now. Mastermind should be handling things like...
She's in the book full of toys. She's in the book full of toys. She's in Tread and Circuits, which is all toy characters.
Yeah, and so her being in Tread and Circuits actually got me excited briefly because I was like, "Hey, doesn't mean they saw an Aileron toy, but I think that they still might have. I think the window's still open because it's a fairly wide window. But I want Mastermind and hopefully other groups someday again to be handling stuff like friggin' Star Drive and Centurion. My other two hills I die on.
Star Drive, please.
Star Drive, by the way, a mugshot in Tread and Circuits. So lending credence.
Yes, next to Star Saber.
Yeah, Star Saber was just I thought that was cute because you see Star Saber in an IDW book and you just start flinching. You're like, what? Why? No. Oh wait, no. But no, he's different now.
He'll kill us all.
But yeah, I see your. I see your point. It was not a point I held myself, but I feel like trying to argue it down is a waste of both our time because it's like you saw lots of toy designs of toys you already didn't like. So like, what am I going to say? Like, that's not to say that was the crux of your entire argument, but I think that's the crux of why. To a certain point, I don't see why I would want to like start like arguing about it too much because like I'll eventually be trying to tell you that you also should be liking the War for Cybertron trilogy toys, and then it's like I'm
hitting me in the face over and over again with an Ultra Magnus. Like him.
Yeah, just creating this endless uphill, like upwards hill that you're supposed to be climbing backwards this whole time. I dig it. I will say, at least it was nicer for the artists not to have to like create the characters from scratch and have readily available reference material as opposed to like doing Google image search dives. That must have been. I'm hypothesizing. That must have been
definitely
nice on a certain level.
That must have been like not having to trawl through TF Wiki to get ideas for character designs. I think was again like from a practical standpoint probably a right move.
Yeah. I like that. I guess it's because I missed wherever it was clarified. I'm happy to hear it wasn't a Hasbro directive because I wouldn't have minded either way myself. But I would hate that ammunition would continue existing because like it distracts from talking about the actual I guess content of the books and is more of like the overarching toy commercial nature, which I'm so happy. Remained separated away as it drifted away from IDW1 the way that it, demonstrably did. I want to get into something that it sounds like you didn't like that I also liked, but I know a lot of people seem bounced off of, which is Treads and Circuits. Because I want to figure this one out too. Although I think you kind of made your point, and I actually see it already when you said the Treads and Circuits. Flashback a few minutes ago. You were mentioning Treads and Circuits. You kind of had the same issue you had of the downsides of the conversational framing, novel style conversational framing of the main book, yet somehow contained in a 4-issue series. I believe is what you were describing.
Yeah, basically.
And when you laid out that thing I mentioned before of saying it without saying that it was the pacing which confused me so much for so long. I completely see what you mean in Treads and Circuits, and, like, surprise, surprise, Treads and Circuits, I didn't have that problem either, which is why I think it's also just a way that it lands, and the way that, you know, like, a personality groks that kind of writing. Because, yeah, I didn't have that problem either, but I also know I saw Treads and Circuits, and I saw the word pacing, and I saw the word lack of action many times. Treads and Circuits, when people said lack of action, I might have actually shouted at someone at one point somewhere. Because
oh, God, no, there was loads of action.
And just to step back 1 sec, I actually am incredibly entertained that you have, in fact, said there was too much action, because I have never once heard that critique about IDW2, and I don't mind how much action there was, but I do think there is a lot of action post issue 25. Not to the point of a detriment as much as you said, but to the point of me saying I see how it's a detriment. And I've never once heard that critique, and I'm so happy you said that, because I'm so tired of the critique being there's no action. When I was reading Treads and Circuits, I saw someone say, oh, there's no action in this book. I was just like, slammed my hands on the table, and I was like, there's plenty of reasons why I can see you don't like this book, but if you're going to tell me there's no action, I don't know what to do. I seriously don't know how to engage you about this. Because there's like a whole issue of the race and stuff blowing up everywhere and whatnot, and kind of letting me down and just killing off Axor after making me all excited that Axor was in the book. That was my big letdown with Treads and Circuits.
Oh, yeah, he does. Oh, God, yeah. I was just like, is he dead? No. I forgot about him. Wait, he was here? And he's gone. That was my reaction.
They got rid of him. They set him up in this really interesting way, because it's like, hey, here's BotCon Circuit, who was weird mainline Axor, who was Lockdown. So they're like, hey, we're going to make Axor and Circuit be, like, from the same planet. That's why they got the same body. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Axor's dead. Oh. Okay, because I thought Axor was actually more interesting than Circuit, so that's bumming me out.
Yeah.
So I did actually like this book for the most part, but I mostly liked it, I think, because I thought it was an interesting take on the Wreckers. I'm talking about other people's opinions now, so I should probably like hold off for a sec. But the other thing about this book I liked is that it was not trying to be Nick Roche Wreckers, and I saw a lot of people who wanted it to be, and I constantly felt like saying, if you love Nick Roche Wreckers, the last thing you want is someone else trying to write Nick Roche Wreckers. Trust me. Because they won't do it. Even if they're a good writer, if they're going to try to hit the Nick Roche Wrecker points, it will come off incredibly hollow, in my opinion. So I'm glad that it wasn't going for that. Although at one point I was getting worried that it secretly was. And I'm kind of glad it didn't. Like, I remember when this got announced, I think I tweeted even, I was like, the last thing I want this book to do is kill everyone, because they're showing me a lovely cast, and I know that the stigma of IDW Wreckers is we're going to kill everyone and make your heart hurt. And I'm like, that should be the stake of a writer and not of the brand of a sub-story. So I kind of like their take on the Wreckers as being like reality TV stars who secretly are actually kind of like the old 80s Wreckers. And I was like, that's sort of neat. And I ended up liking the story more than I thought I would. Because issue 3, I was like, oh, this is weird. And in issue 4, I actually liked a whole lot, which I think is the opposite experience a lot of people had. Issue 3, I wasn't as into as issue 4. But I will say, I don't mind Knockout's design, and I did up until recently. Did you know what they did to me? Because they showed that Knockout, and I was like, so in the book I didn't mind it because I was like, whatever, it's Knockout, I can tell it's Knockout. Yeah. The toy comes out, and I'm like, oh, he's got a nose. Because I don't care that he's on the Jazz body, because I don't mind that. But I was like, oh, the nose. Then I see the bigger photo, and he's got the super sexy, the carved in tear lines on his cheekbones, and I was like. I went and pre-ordered Knockout, but also I wasn't happy about it because how dare you do the most handsome robot design possible, you bastards. So I actually kind of like this Knockout design now, but not.
So my response to that is, my reaction to the Knockout design was, well, now I have to buy the red one.
Yes.
That was my reaction.
Yes, you do have to buy the red one. Welcome to the club.
I just hear so little good about that line.
So I actually
that's a really good looking knockout.
So I like that mold a lot. Mine hasn't. I have him and I have Jackpot, and neither of them have cracked. I'm sure they haven't. I just haven't noticed. But like, you have to do the roof and the doors in a certain order. That's the trick.
Yeah.
And even then, I've been told by people who do it in a certain order, it still cracks on theirs, and so mine probably will someday. But like, I think it's a fine toy still, because to me at least, the nature of the crack just means that, like, I don't know. I feel like it means that the backpack will be floppier, but gravity means it will just flop into the right position. But I haven't had hands on with a broken one yet, so I'm not sure. But anyway, that's my take on Treads and Circuits. I generally liked a lot of it. I felt that it had it was like IDW2, but some of the characters were weaker, and we spent time with weaker characters that I wasn't as into. So I didn't like it as much as the Ruckley stuff. But I mean, Jack Lawrence's art, I think, really did hold a lot of it together where I was getting disconnected, because Jack Lawrence does good Transformers. And also, when I found out that the writer was a co-writer on Transformers versus the Terminator, it actually made me feel better about the book, because a lot of my problems with the book were similar to that one, where I like Transformers versus the Terminator quite a bit. I also feel like it did some weird character death decisions that kind of let me down, and did like a couple character swerves where I was like, this was more interesting.
Where it kind of just blows up half the cast at random.
Yeah, I was like, this was more interesting before the swerve, because the interesting part was you didn't do the predictable swerve, but then you did the predictable swerve. Which is sort of, and I would say that is something you could level at Treads and Circuits as well, which is like, it almost, so Knockout isn't a secret Decepticon, and then when he is, I was like, okay, because like I was into it when he was a secret Decepticon, so I'm fine with this, but I was actually more interested when you started making me think he wasn't, and so it's like, it's a weird critique when it's like, you actually, you foreshadowed something and made me more interested when you swerved away from doing it, but then the swerve was you're doing it anyway, and I don't really know how to lay out that critique any better. But I was like, the last step you took actually kind of took it down a little bit. But yeah, I don't know, Mikey. I talked a whole lot after saying, let's talk about the thing you weren't as into. Let me talk about it forever.
No, like Thread and Circuits. It's like I said, it was like all the pacing problems I was wrong choice of words, but all the problems I was having with the main book boiled into one. And like you said, there was connections to, I could see the connection to the Terminator issues I was having, and before that to some of the editorial decisions on Visionaries, because that's where he cut his chops, and I've seen a lot of some of the things I see is David's fingerprints on stuff sometimes make me blink a lot. But yeah, it was one of those ones where I didn't want it to be Wreckers. I didn't want it to be like previous Wreckers, but I did go in like, that name carries weight in terms of not the topics of the books, but the qualities of the books. Like, they hit us, there is a certain tier that you set yourself up for with that name, and I feel like calling it Wreckers was kind of a mistake. Because people went in expecting something, and down to the fact they use the same font as they used to. Like, I think if they just changed the font, they could have done themselves some favors.
I think if it was just called Transformers Tread and Circuits, and then the reveal at the end of issue 1 was it's the Wreckers, I think might have
yeah, like, we're going to form the Wreckers out of this. This is the origin story of the Wreckers. Like, that, you know, especially things that didn't work for me in that story were things like, we're a secret. Are you? Because you're really obvious. And so forth. But, I don't know, like, something I wish, like, is that we'd had more side books. Because I think I would have a lot fonder memories, because most of those side books, most of Galaxies, Escape, there was something else, the anniversary, the holiday specials and stuff like that, they clicked with me so much more than Tread and Circuits or the main book. And like, it's one of those things where I wish we'd gotten to the stage where the continuity was comfortable enough in itself that we had more of that. Because I think, you know, I don't want it to end up in the same scenario we were with IDW1, but
Yeah, well, that totally, I think, kind of goes back to my point of, like, only getting one ongoing and occasionally, like, one other book is why I stick up for the ongoing so much of like, what it was trying to do as the start of a new continuity, and, like, that I just don't see another way that it could have done it, because it didn't get to have all these other side stories until, the back half, because a lot of this stuff is built off of an inherent knowledge of, like, oh yeah, and in the main book there's all this stuff, but then this really fun stories over here, and, like, I think the main book is still necessary for that to exist. I think bits of the main book could be better, but I think as an overarching thing, it is what allows for a lot of this other stuff to have been so much more fun, because it all has a fairly tight cohesion without being literally, like, it is one of the better ones, but, like, without literally being like Escape, where this is happening 2 steps to the left of the main book. It all still is sort of cohesive, like Knockout being a not even a sleeper agent, but just, like, picking a side at the end, like, feels like it aligns with stuff, like the way that these books would always reference kind of the events of issue 25 and stuff around it, like the satellite coming down, the Titans going down and everything. It created a neat sort of cohesion that, like, even, like, things like Marvel Comics and stuff, like, that they always want to do and then overdo it, like your classic event books, and
Dark Crisis coming in.
Yeah, and Once Upon a Time, Dark Cybertron is the easy one. IDW was tasked with trying to do that, and that's also why I like IDW too, is that, like, it does it without making it an event book, and one could say that not being an event book is to a negative in that it's easy to miss that it happened, and I'm like, I don't disagree, but I think that if you were invested already, you were probably already keeping up with the ongoing book anyway, so the ongoing book doesn't really need to become an event book. Anyway,
I mean, my general approach to event books is don't just make things naturally head towards a direction. But, like, I think event books have killed the comic book industry in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like event book is a bit of a cuss word, like, to be frank. And I think it's a shame because, like, technically it's not inherently a bad concept. It's just the way that comics are marketed, and this is outside of IDW, just the way that the comics industry and the buyers, I think, on the broad scale, pay attention to books is what fosters what event books are. Not to, like, kind of bully comic book regular readers, but I am. Sorry. But yeah, Tread the Circuits, the one other thing I'll say is I had to look on the wiki to understand why it was called Tread the Circuits. I understand what this title is referencing.
What is it referencing?
Bread and circuses. It's an ancient Roman concept.
Oh, the idea of, like, you can do whatever you want as long as you provide them with bread and circuses, because,
I think Tread and Circuits is just kind of a weak name for a book.
That doesn't work for the comparison you're making.
Like, I kind of see it because it's sort of is the theme of what Velocitron is that everyone's fine as long as the Speedia 500 happens, and it's like, I kind of get it, but Tread and Circuits is kind of, it doesn't roll off the tongue that well, I think. I don't know. I don't
No,
I don't want one word titles and everything, but, like, I just feel like there could have been a better title for this that also I think would have laid out better expectations. And part of that, now that you've said it, I'm like, yeah, I don't mind that it's called Wreckers, but I have seen that did damage to this before it came out, and I think the damage done is not necessarily IDW's fault. I think a little bit of that comes down to the way that people have a preconceived notion of what the Wreckers are, that really should be a preconceived notion of Nick Roche writing, not the Wreckers necessarily. But that's all. I have this habit, and I don't feel ashamed about it, that sometimes I tend to turn on the critiquer a little bit more now and then. But, I do that because I have my own petty critiques I make. You know what? I'll say it here. I didn't like the movie Ant-Man. And I take tons of crap for that constantly to this day, so I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I didn't hate it. I just didn't think it was all that amazing. But yeah, Mikey, I'll pass the hat back to you because I don't know where to go.
Sounds like it's full of rage to me.
Yeah.
Sounds...
more like Shat Man.
Yay! I get it. He said a funny. He said a funny.
Shrugging.
I'm running out of things to say because, like, we covered my main ones.
Yeah.
So I know you want to have your Termagax love bomb, but is there anything else you want to stick in beforehand?
Well, I will say once again that I am a few months behind, so like I don't know anything about. Has War's End started even?
Yes, we're one issue from wrapping up. Actually,
okay,
issue 3
I
came out
haven't.
Today.
I haven't read any War's End yet, and I probably should if there's only one left, so that I can be there for one of the first endings. I also haven't read the Grimlock book yet, and that's on me. It's just
you go to hell.
I have heard nothing bad about it. I have just heard nothing.
It's so good.
What I'll say is I've heard nothing about it except for the odd people saying, "Yeah, it's cool," and then Mikey let me know that
it's really good. I love it. It's so it's probably the best character study of Grimlock we've had, and also it's like just a really fun book. The only thing that I'll warn you about is like the art's going to be a bit Marmite. You're going to have to decide whether you like the art style or not, but just it's so fun. It's so fun.
Is it? I don't know if this is even a spoiler necessarily, so you don't have to tell me. But like, is it part of an IDW2 conversation, or is it more of its own thing?
No, it's essentially it was an idea that was pitched for IDW1, and then it's essentially Conan the Barbarian, but with Grimlock as Conan. And it's its own continuity, its own thing. Originally, the plan was for it to have a sequel book called Grimlock in Hell, which would basically involve Grimlock meeting his god. And you find out who his god is in King Grimlock.
Okay.
And it was partially inspired by Godzilla in Hell, which is a fantastic book as well. But by the time he pitched the sequel, the axe had dropped, and he's like,
Just gotta take that to the new people.
And he just told me, oh god. Before we go on, here's something I'm very, very curious about, because I've had this theory since this whole thing started. Do you think originally there was going to be a crossover with the Lost Light? Because I've had a theory that at some point, if they'd kept the license, they were going to we're bringing the Lost Light back as
100%.
A sales boost.
100%. In fact, I was looking forward to it because I like those kind of. I don't. So, the multiverse is becoming like a word now in 2022. But leaving that aside,
oh my god,
leaving that aside, because I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think it's one of the best movies I've seen this decade.
I need to see that. I've been meaning to see that.
Yeah,
I heard very good things.
And I like multiverses. In fact, I don't hate Marvel Studios either. So, with all that said, it's bumming me out how multiverse is becoming a headline buzzword that fandom people start using as part of like a general lexicon, because it's devaluing what I like about the word, and that's fine because it's my problem. It's no one else's problem. But I was really because I thought it was in the cards because it was such a straightforward thing to do. I thought it was like on year 5 or something. We do our cool fun check in with the Lost Light crew to have the IDW1 meets IDW2 moments. Because by then I was especially after issue 25 and the few issues thereafter, I was like, this is going to be such a different continuity that it would be fun to have like this kind of kooky little crossover. I'm sad that we probably won't see that.
I always thought it would be interesting if you had Autobot Megatron meet current Megatron, because like it would be like this, like the guy who's seen it all versus the guy who's at the start of his journey, and there's nothing my Megatron could say to new Megatron that would get through to his skull because he's too thick-skulled. And I thought that would always be a fun conversation.
I actually would really love to see. I mean, this is getting to the love bomb already, but I want to see Termagax meet Autobot Megatron, because genuinely, and obviously she's a written character, right? But like, let's just stepping outside of that. I don't know what Termagax's reaction to Autobot Megatron would be, and it fascinates me. Like, I don't know what she'd say, and I want to know what she'd say because no disrespect to him. I'm more interested in what Termagax has to say than what Terminus has to say. Termagax has very interesting things to say about lots of things, and I guess I mostly want to see Termagax react to IDW1 stuff because, again, like I have this whole thing about IDW2 is the Termagax universe because she is the linchpin that changed plenty of things from their rote and both their rote Evergreen and their IDW1 paths. A lot of that is on the back of Termagax. But yeah, I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, don't bring in IDW. Well, let's stand on its own." Blah blah. And it's like, yeah, but also it would be fun. It doesn't have to be a high stakes story. In fact, that would bum me out if it was a high stakes story where like two characters, one from each universe, dies at the end or something. It's like I just want to have a fun story. Like I want a fun story. I want some heartstrings, and I don't need character death stakes. I don't need friggin' like. Okay, it would be really straightforward for the inciting incident to be that this is where half of Overlord showed up, right? But
like his backside falls on someone.
Yeah, but also then you bring in the stigma of like, well, if Overlord's here, he's got to kill someone, which has always bummed me out because I'm like, that's not what makes Overlord interesting. It's just what makes him scary. But like, there's other stuff about him.
Yeah, like what makes him interesting is that he's just like the world's most jilted. You love me. You think about me every day. I have not thought about you in many years. You think about me every day.
Oh, and can you imagine that Overlord meeting IDW2 Megatron? Thinking for a second, like, oh, maybe I'm in the past. Maybe I can finally get through, and then going like, you're just a piece of shit. You're a bad person. You're not inspired. and then having Overlord just having a big throwdown with the Rise, where it's like, oh, by the way, we don't know what a Phase Sixer is, but we have like this entire team of like war criminals, who are pretty much on your level. So have fun. Like that would be kind of neat. Like IDW2 Six Shot having it out with IDW1 Overlord.
Yeah, I'd love that. I will say I prefer IDW2 Six Shot to IDW1 Six Shot because he's a character.
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable.
Yeah, I think Phase Sixers are cool. I think the sad part is most Phase Sixers never got to be more than a plot point for the most part. In IW1.
Yep. They were there. Most Phase Sixers, unfortunately, became a way of showing the DJD were scary.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I will say it's kind of cool. The DJD do not exist in IW2. I think that was, again, one of those smart decisions of like, why invite the problem of people saying that this wasn't as good? Just you don't have to do it. You have plenty of other people you can do. The Rise is almost like the Rise is like this gift basket of characters who didn't really do stuff in IW1 for the most part. Then like, here's a Shockwave, and we're going to make Shockwave just absolutely not IW1 Shockwave. And yeah, that was kind of cool. I like the Rise a lot. I should say, if we're talking about stuff I really loved before Termagax, Team Stream, one of those little organic things that comes together where you're just like, oh, you had fun writing this, and you like them, so they get to be cool.
Hey, Chris, Shadow Striker doesn't have any good toys.
Correct. And a sense of...
And I'm bitter about that for Cyberverse, and...
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, I would love to see Cyberverse Shadow Striker from the end of the show meet this Shadow Striker as well. Like, this is just, there's lots of the Rise and Team Stream and all the little pockets of weird Decepticons and pseudo Decepticons. There's a lot of cool stuff in there that I enjoyed, partly because they didn't constantly get murdered all the time. Something else actually I like about IDW2. Transformers in IDW2 are way more durable, for lack of better terms. A lot of kill shots in IDW1 that I've seen in IDW2 where I'm just like, oh, that character just died. And then they're fine later. I'm like, you know what? I like this. Because it reminds me that Brainstorm's death was kind of a shock to them, and that, like, generally they've been so depowered since the Threefold Spark War that, like, they also are just kind of durable. They can get shot in the chest and they're fine. Like, what was it? The little security team when they started getting murked. I kind of like that. Like, was it was it roulette or because it wasn't Shadow Stone, it was roulette. She didn't get killed from getting shot. She got killed from getting shot and then shot at point blank by a bigger gun. And I was like, no, that makes sense to me more, and it's also more chilling and etc. Or headshots, are a thing too. But I felt like character mortality in IDW2 for the most part is where I prefer, or, not mortality, I guess the mortal wound durability, to make it sound like a D&D stat, I like it better in IDW2. Because IW1, one of my biggest problems sometimes was when it felt like, oh, we gotta kill someone, because it's time to kill someone, and you get stuff like, for instance, the Protectobots, right, in Lost Light. It was Lost Light, right, where the Protectobots got all murked?
Yes, although I think he said at one point, oh no, they're not murked, but they never came back, so I'm counting them as murked.
They were like storyline murked. Rook got like brain deaded while on a bed or something.
Oh yeah, Rook was dead. Rook was dead, and then we had a combiner combining with someone who wasn't part of the combiner components, which never got touched on really. If was there a significance to that? Could you do that?
Hey,
there was no enigma involved, so
hey, low key.
That was during my like foot tapping phase.
Low key, my least favorite issues of Lost Light ever are the ones with the Protectobots and Defensor because of the look how cool Starsaber is bit at the end. Actually, I don't mind a lot of Lost Light.
That was out of was out of nowhere. That was just like I also didn't like when Getaway started quoting Trump, which just felt forced.
That made me go like, okay, sure. I was like, whatever. Like, in a lot of Lost Light,
that's dated.
A lot of Lost Light I ended up enjoying, but like the part where I legit was like, I don't like this at all, was the way that the Protectobots got treated in those. I think it was just 2 issues.
Yep.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm just trying to think anything else. Flame War getting to be a character. This is Team Stream stuff, but I am part of the Flame War love train. Like, she hasn't gotten to like feature in a story herself necessarily, but she's been in enough of it and said enough stuff where it's like, this is a fun take on Flame War. I like the idea of Slipstream being a big buff general type who is spooky. I enjoy that quite a bit. And also I like the kind of threatening Micromasters as well. Like, they're little dudes, but it's like, oh, but there's like 2 or 3 of them, and they seem to think life is cheap, and that's kind of scary. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm racing my brain around because there's so much stuff I know that I enjoyed as well. But I once I start saying the word Termigax, I start to get very fixated. The Valentine's special we talked about, that was lovely. I was gonna check on what happened in the annual because I read all of this digitally to the point where
the annual was Computron and the Titan whose name I can't remember.
Yeah, Computron. I adore the idea of Arachnid's combination core, like making an artificial copy of one of the vaunted relics, because it doesn't demystify the relics, but it makes them far less of a magic artifact. And I like that. I like the idea that, like, and this is even me thinking about TCG stuff, like, because this is once the TCG was this is in 2021. This is when we were into the community set era of the TCG, and I was like, this is awesome because the enigmas in the TCG are fairly weak mechanics to deal with now. Like, they're wave 2 mechanics. They're not actually. They play slow and they're a little bit clunky. And like, I like the idea, like, the combination core as like, here's an experimental, messy way that you could combine that is not necessarily good for you or anyone else. But I love that idea. Right, this is where they had... oh, hang on, I just saw the name. I'm looking at the wiki page. Thunderwing as another Sentinel Prime consequence. Like, oh, you're too smart, and you don't do what I tell you. Hey, have this glass of champagne. Here's a medal. I got this moon that you got to go to run a facility for me. It's on the other side of the galaxy. Don't worry, you'll come home sometime. And you stop answering the phone. Also,
Yeah.
introducing Bludgeon and Arachnid in ways I fairly enjoyed. And it gives me two other little topics, actually, I want to talk about. Number one, just briefly, because they haven't said much. They've been more of just an existing thing. I love the way the Titans were used in this book, as they're why Cybertron is safe to do commerce at the beginning, because there are giant city-sized robots orbiting the planet. And I was like, that's a cool way to kind of twist the Titans a little bit as a concept. And I kind of like that the first major step of things going badly was also like, we need to deal with the Titans right now. And I kind of like that they were the focus. Them and the Energon satellite were like the focuses of the initial coup. I thought that was kind of cool. And also, I want to talk a little bit more about Sentinel Prime, because I like this Sentinel Prime so much. I love that he is just the Titan's Return toy for the most part. That's fine, because you know what? That's the Sentinel Prime toy. So I'm happy I have it. I also like that silhouette on him. It has, to me, it has the right look of like, this is a built, learned soldier who's probably also an asshole, and he is. But what I really like about him is they didn't go. I had fun with the IDW 1 version to a degree. Maybe it was also the era, right? The late 2010s. But I liked that for once. I'm going to say for once, because this isn't new, but for once in a fleshed out story of length, the former leadership of Cybertron, Sentinel Prime, wasn't basically a supervillain. He wasn't pretty much a Decepticon, but orange or something. Like, I like that he clearly, and I almost wish we got to spend more time with him, because to me, he really communicated the idea of, this is a guy who killed lots of people and was good at it for this in the name of justice or whatever. And so he became the leader of the planet, and he very quickly found out he hates being the leader of the planet, but he also is convinced no one else is smart enough or reliable enough to be the leader of the planet, so it's on him. He has to do it. So he always has this air of like, I hate this job, but I genuinely think I'm the only one qualified to do it. So like those little moments of him sitting on his throne, I guess, you know, his big high chair, and just like squeezing the arm of the chair, you know, like very quick to stand up and go threaten people because that's the way he thinks. And I love that it culminated in making the Rainmakers have a real big moment and making them kind of scary. And I kind of like that, like, it took the Rainmakers and it took them literally bisecting him to finally kill him, and that he was still alive for a fair amount of time afterwards. And nothing said that, like, nothing to me was a better end line for that character. A very Game of Thrones-y moment, I think, too. For one of his final words, when someone finds him, rather than, you know, like having a dying speech or like anything, the first person who finds him, he just grabs them by the neck and gives them like 2 or 3 directives, one of which is kill Starscream. Because he's like, I'm dead, that's fine. You're probably all completely screwed because I was the thing holding this all together. So as I lay here with literally half my body gone, grab you by the neck, do this, also kill Starscream.
Before you go on, here's a question. What do you think about the near meaninglessness of Starscream in this book? Because I kind of like it. He is a background character who was clearly going to be big, but he is so much more secondary than pretty much every other major Decepticon. I
really like it. I understand that it can be disappointing, but there's 2 big reasons I like it. Number one, I think it is being, I guess it's sad to say, has been done effectively, because whenever Starscream did have a lengthy conversation, I was kind of riveted, because I was like, oh shit, Starscream's talking. He's doing so, what's going on? But number 2, Starscream was a colossal component of phase, I guess 2 and 3 of IDW, like 3 especially.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so much like, you know, kind of like Brainstorm in a way, the last thing to try to do is tell a lengthy Starscream story when we had almost the Omni Starscream story told in the last couple years, like prior. He's got to be around for various reasons, some unfortunate nostalgia driven, but I thought it was a really decent decision, because like also there are a ton of characters. It is a crowded book, and if you weren't grokking the delivery, it was easy to forget characters that you even liked. Just to reference your experience, right? So I think it worked to kind of have him on the sidelines. Where I think his biggest story was in the Halloween special, was it?
Yes, absolutely. Where he, which was a cool idea that wasn't quite as good a horror as the Insecticons. I would say that.
I wouldn't disagree. I like the idea more as a Starscream story than as a Halloween story. Because it was a neat idea. And I do like, on a horror level, I do like the idea of someone was actually they I have no mouth and I must screamed, basically. Well, that was literally the name of the story, right? But they were trapped, basically, and I like that idea as a concept. But yeah, I'm into Starscream and IDW2 as far as saving him. So I think if this hadn't ended, he would have been an oh shit it's blank moment again, 3 or 4 years down the line. But
Sentinel.
Right, Sentinel. Keep me on track here. Sentinel's dying words also, I think, just to bounce it off that, they added to Starscream's story, because it's this, he's the head of intelligence. I like that people talked about Starscream a lot. I thought that was actually a really effective way to do stuff without having to have him front and center the whole time of this dude, he came into being the head of intelligence. Also, that was one of the ones I loved to drop on people who hadn't been reading, because it would get a reaction where it's in IDW2, Starscream is the head of Cybertronian intelligence, and people go oh, because knowing the caricature of Starscream, that's the last place you want him to be, right? As a scientist, sure. As the head of the Seekers, sure. As the head of intelligence, probably a terrible place for a guy who wants to basically twist words into knives to stick into people, right? And also, boy, I liked Soundwave in this too. Soundwave didn't get to do a ton, but I loved the dynamic of Soundwave, former head of intelligence, now kind of part of Megatron's whole thing. That whole interconnected relationship I enjoyed. But yeah, Sentinel Prime's dying words are one of my favorite moments, because I was this is a perfect way for this Sentinel Prime to go out. Is this very this is the end of season 1 kind of thing, if he's going to say something that will have ramifications. I like that a lot. It is worth. Oh, it's also worth touching on. I've really enjoyed how they've been using the Torchbearers in this, because they get to be individual characters when they show up for the most part. Pyromagna getting to be Pyromagna and not one of the Victorion members. Because in IDW1, I felt like the Torchbearers they showed up partly to sell Victorion, and then I felt rarely got to be anything but Victorion.
They were there to give Pyromagna someone who said, yeah, you're right, buddy. And then they were also there to basically they were in the long term there to give Slide a character moment,
a place to kind of to be. But in IDW2, I like we haven't had time with all of them, but I like that we've had actual time with some of them on their own. That was kind of that was kind of fun. I enjoyed who Pyromagna has been in the story. I like the Jumpstream story. I thought it was a cool way actually to do some weird foreshadowing stuff. As much as it kind of called back to the Functionist Universe storytelling, I felt it justified itself in being more of a foreshadow and more of also a way to weave Skywarp back into things. But that little storyline of seeing the X-Archon universe was cool. I like X-Archon as a concept, and I the last thing I'll throw in is I don't disagree with you. I didn't say this out loud. I think I forgot to. I don't disagree with you, and I kind of agree that it would have been neater if it was just a handful of survivors from that war are still alive now. But I liked conceptually the War of the Threefold Spark being the specter hanging over the civilization that partly is why they are so peaceful now and limited on energy and everything. Is because we don't want this to happen again. And X-Archon, I think, is a really cool character idea, and it is a bummer that X-Archon is the crunch of the ending of IDW, in that X-Archon to me is the one who has been thrown into this well ahead of time. Because I like the character idea a lot, and I've enjoyed the bits I've read so far of X-Archon wandering around being a creep. But unfortunately, X-Archon is a little underbaked, because I think X-Archon was very clearly going to be the Unicron of this continuity, and I think that X-Archon really wasn't meant to be something like that. Wasn't meant to be a character we were interacting with until a year or two from now, at least. But I will say, there's still time. I hope that X-Archon, at some point before this ends, blows up a planet that happens to be Earth, and nobody really notices because they've never been there. Because I want this to be the continuity where definitively they never went to Earth. Because I think it would be funny. It would be interesting.
Oh, I would love if the way this ends is, and the whole Decepticon thing, it was basically just like, what, 2 years? Like, never, like, not that really that big a moment in our history. Like, I think if it kind of ends setting up like, and we will leave the planet, and did you hear about the Allspark? Or like, let's go to this blue ball over here. I was just like, no, I would rather it was like closed-ended than open-ended. And if the closed ending was like the Decepticon War ended up being snuffed out before it became too ravenous, I'd be all up for that.
Oh yeah, just because as much as this is kind of always felt like, oh, and the ending is they crash land on Earth, which it's like that's fine, but it would be neat if there was a big twist though, and I want the twist to be so heavy-handed as Earth gets blown up before any Transformers ever land there. I think that would be so fun. Just wipe us out. Just get us out of here. I mean, fictionally. Don't do that in real life. I have things on planet Earth right now. I have toys and things I own, and that would wreck them. So don't do that. IRL. But yeah, I guess we should I want to get into Termigax. Termigax is so friggin' cool! Holy... What a cool character. That is almost designed as like, okay, every prologue story beat that Transformers tends to have, what if there was someone who was, in one way or another, not necessarily responsible for it, but is the one who incited it to happen in some way? And like, you know, the easy one being the Ascenticons, right? Like, I love the idea of like, there was someone on Cybertron who was able to bring about a golden age and tried, and was so disappointed she gave up, but didn't get killed. She's still lingering. That's the thing that makes her so interesting to me, is that she's around and doesn't want anything to do with it. And then when she has to get involved, I was so... one of the biggest fist pump moments for me is when she shows up to yell at Megatron, because I was like, oh, Termigax is so covered in death flags. Now she's yelling at Megatron. Megatron, shoots her point blank. And it's like, yeah, that was a body double. And then you go back and she's in her house and it's like rising up on legs and walking away. And I was like, this is perfect. I want Termigax to... I don't mind that she helps, Autobots now and then, maybe helps Decepticons now and then. I want Termigax existing here as like a rogue entity, with this House of Wonders, like just wandering around being someone who is absolutely not a cartoon character. Is like kind of my short capsule of what I like about Termigax. I should pass the hat over to you though, because I've been yammering for ages about things.
No, I really like Thermigax. Thermigax feels appropriate to the world, like the way you describe it, like it's some way tied to everything. It's kind of like a benevolent, not the word, less insinuated version of IDW1 Shockwave.
Yeah,
like she didn't set out to have as much influence as she ended up with in the events, because she had a goal, but it was more like everything she did. She's just such a almost prolific person that just like she ended up triggering events or contributing to events in ways that she probably could never have predicted she was going to. But like she's always feels one step ahead of everyone else. She feels the most how do I put this? Most real in some ways, because she's like, I'm not interested in taking a side in a war where you're saying you're good and he's evil, or vice versa. Like, because it's not the point. It's not what I started the Ascenticon for. I like how she basically is just done with everyone. She doesn't dislike him. She's just done.
Yeah,
it's like,
she doesn't.
Wheeljack, I've known you for years. Get out of my house.
Yeah, she's like, I tried, and that's what I like about her is the little bits and pieces we got to see of, like, right after the Threefold Spark War, she was actively trying to advance their civilization in a way. Also, on a personal level, I'm also a big believer in there not being a status quo as far as, like, you know, you should always, like, change is inevitable, etc. And to have a character who is built around the idea change is inevitable and we should embrace it, who is also literally a transformer, right? Is just it's very simple, straightforward, pitch perfect. And yeah, like, as a real character, she's one who's like, you know, we should foster these unique abilities and make them proud of these unique abilities and turn them into a good member of society, and advance all of us, and you know, be happy that we can look forward to a lack of inevitability. And I love that it's like, and it was the rest of the Transformers being kind of the Transformers as characters that completely destroyed all of that optimism in her over the course of however long it took.
But it's also something I like is that while she does clearly, like, she is the best of, like, she wants the best for everyone, she does come across, like, especially with stuff like the Constructicons or something like that, it's like she's so enamored with the idea of proving this point that she can be callous and she cannot necessarily think of the well-being of the individual in front of her, because that individual will contribute to her point, which is something I like. Yeah. Because it's not, you know, she's not a bad person in that regard. She's just like, I am really concerned with my goal, and I really don't hope you Constructicons are really happy, but I'll be honest, the most important thing for me right now is that you prove I'm right.
Well, it makes her a really...
That's how she comes across.
It makes the idea that Cybertron, for a period, seemed to be primarily led by her and Sentinel Prime is also so... Because they both mean well. That's the thing I like about them. That's why I was saying about Sentinel Prime, is like, he's not like some supervillain dictator. It's like, they both mean well, and they both think that they're doing what's right, and neither of them had the right voices to temper what they were doing, basically. They instead had voices that were telling them all the worst things and, like, stoking all the wrong fires in the wrong directions. And Sentinel Prime ended up, you know, paying for it in the worst way possible, and Termagax paid for it on, like, I guess like an emotional level earlier, of, like, just literally closing her doors to the world. And that's also why I'm so happy they didn't kill her off right away. Like, hey, maybe, I don't know, maybe they killed her off this month, and my whole point doesn't necessarily stand.
I cannot confirm or deny. I will say I have been expecting her to die for a long time, because it just felt like, and Megatron kills her to show how far he's gone. And it hasn't gone that way, which I definitely don't mind.
Yeah, that's the thing I was talking about earlier, is like, I felt she was covered in death flags, as like, and then Megatron kills her to fully close off his past, etc. The least interesting thing he could do is do that, because it is so predictable and has been done before. Megatron, you know, killing someone from the old ruling class, to make his point. Like, that's also why I was glad that Megatron didn't necessarily hand murder Sentinel Prime either. Like that, I really like how hands-off this Megatron has been, because it makes him different from the Megatrons that we generally tend to encounter. This, you know, he might have been a gladiator at some point, but this Megatron now is anything but. He is a politician first and foremost, and I love it because it's like, he's not even a cartoonish politician. He is just a politician, like in all the worst ways. Like the whole bit about him, like, coming up with, like, the logo and presenting to the public that structured speech of, like, we are now the Decepticons, and it's like, oh, this is just delightful nonsense. And I also loved it because we had Termagax there to just call it out for what it is immediately.
Mm-mm-mm.
And yeah, also on just like a Transformers design, toy nerd level, I like her design a lot. I love that Termagax is just a tall box robot. Like she plays out the sort of simplified Transformer design while taller and more built out because she's been around for a while, etc. Like her design really works for me in its simplicity, and I really hope somehow we can get a toy of it. Because it's not like she's super dynamic, but it's more like I want an action figure of this cool character, and she's so simple. Because as far as I know, her alt mode, as far as we've seen, I think was kind of just like a rectangle alt mode. Because I'm pretty sure we saw it at some point. I just can't remember where. It might have just.
I don't remember.
It might have been in a design pick instead of like in the book. But yeah, she has a good design for who she is. The whole thing about the house is really cool. I don't know. She is a perfect example of like, this is the kind of character you want in a Transformers story to be there perpetually. She's not a third faction. She's not like, there's the Autobots and the Decepticons and the themed faction. She's this individual who remains slightly enigmatic while also kind of an open book, has importance to the history of the continuity, and demonstrably could affect massive change going forward if she chooses to get involved. So this is a wonderful combination of stuff that, like, in any story would be great. I just love seeing it in my Transformers stories as well. And especially in IDW 2, which, as I said many times, the worst thing this continuity could do is try to just be like IDW 1. So this is also a fantastic way to just set itself apart. It's like, almost like, okay, the idea of the Terminus character, what if we, like, flesh that out hugely and don't make that like a footnote, a dead mentor, wrote kind of thing. Like, instead, what if your mentor isn't dead, your mentor is just utterly disappointed in you? Like, I like that as a motivation for Megatron as well.
That basically, his mom is just like really disappointed in the choices he made in life.
Yeah. Like what if Megatron's whole thing, whoever inspired it, what if for once they weren't dead and they said, no, this isn't what I wanted. I'm not proud of you. Don't do this in my name.
You're not coming home tonight until you clean the car.
That's right. And then the car transforms. It's like, that's right. But yeah, it's, I like Termagax a lot. In short, yeah.
So we have done. I think I'm going to double check this. We have done 2.5 hours. So roughly, I feel like that's enough for this discussion. So I'm going to ask everyone who does one of these shows 2 questions, and if you get them wrong, the shark pit will open.
Oh, good.
Won't open under you. I will just open the shark pit.
Give him some air.
Yeah. Ironically, I'm torturing the sharks in doing so. First question. What would you say to the people of IDW if they could hear you now?
I mean, it's kind of corny, but obviously I'd say thank you so much for taking a toy commercial and turning it into what I would call legit sci-fi in every way, shape, and form, in a way that also welcomed so many more people into enjoying what Transformers are, and making it, in short, a whole lot more than some toy commercial, which is what it was when it started, is what I would say.
Is there any... Okay.